My name is Alara, and the cold seeped into my bones long before winter arrived. It settled in my marrow exactly 412 days ago, on the night the moon turned its back on me. That was the count I kept. The number of sunrises I had witnessed from the window of my small cottage at the very edge of the nightfall pack lands, where the shadows were longest and the warmth of the pack fire never reached. I remember the scent of night-blooming jasmine, the electric hum in the air, the crush of pack members in their finest silks, the moon ceremony, the moment when fate reveals the threads it has woven between souls. I stood there, a barely noticed Omega in a simple linen dress, when Alpha Kalen Vance stepped into the circle. Our eyes met across the crowded clearing, and the world snapped. A golden cord, invisible yet more real than my own heartbeat, lassoed itself around my core, pulling taut between us. The mate bond, perfect, radiant, undeniable. For one breathless second, I saw my future in his storm-gray eyes, a future of belonging, of purpose, of a love written in the stars. Then his expression shattered. Horror, disbelief, revulsion. It washed over his handsome face like a tidal wave, erasing any trace of wonder. The bond between us, so new and fragile, trembled under the weight of his rejection. His voice, usually so rich and commanding, came out flat and final. I reject this bond, I reject you, Alara. 5 words, that was all it took to unravel a destiny. The golden cord didn't just break, it exploded into shards of searing agony that embedded themselves in my soul. I collapsed to the dew-kissed grass, the gasps of the pack a distant roar in my ears. No one moved to help me. My own mother turned her face away, her cheeks flushed with a shame that should have been his to carry. An alpha rejecting his true mate was a tragedy. An alpha rejecting an omega mate was an unthinkable scandal. The message was clear. I was so fundamentally lacking that even destiny had made a mistake. Kalen corrected it without a second glance, so I learned to live in the silence he left behind. My world shrank to the dusty archives of the pack library, where I tended to histories no one cared to read, and the lonely path to my cottage. I became a ghost in my own home, a whispered punchline, a lesson in what happens when an Omega forgets her place. The day the Luna candidates arrived, the pack stirred with a nervous energy I felt even through my self-imposed exile. From my archival window, I watched them parade into the central square. Lyra of the Stormpeak Pack, a warrior with eyes like polished flint and a scar across her cheek that spoke of battles won. Seraphina, daughter of an Eastern Alpha whose beauty was a weapon she wielded with practiced grace. 5 others, each more impressive than the last, radiant, powerful, perfect. They were here for the trial, the mysterious ritual every potential Luna of the Nightfall Pack must pass, a tradition so old its origins were lost to time. No one spoke of what it entailed. They only knew the Alpha had no Luna, and these she-wolves had come to try their luck. One by one, they entered the Alpha's lodge at the forest's edge. One by one, they emerged. Lyra stormed out first, her fists clenched, her proud shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Seraphina followed hours later, her perfect composure cracked, tears cutting silent trails through her carefully applied cosmetics. Within 3 days, all 7 had failed. The pack buzzed with confused speculation, a hive of anxious gossip. I told myself it was none of my concern. Kalen would find a suitable mate eventually, a she-wolf of appropriate rank and strength. His rejection of me was proof enough of the standards he demanded. I was sorting through a crate of water-damaged tax records when the beta found me. Ronan was a mountain of a man, loyal to a fault, his face usually an unreadable mask. Today, a faint tension pinched the corners of his eyes. Ilara, the Alpha commands your presence. My blood turned to ice. For what reason, Beta? That is for him to say, come now. The walk to the Alpha's lodge was a blur of familiar shame. Pack members stopped to stare, their whispers like insects skittering over my skin. The rejected Omega summoned by the Alpha, what fresh humiliation awaits her? The lodge was different inside, darker, the air tasted of pine resin and deep earth. Kalen stood before the massive hearth, its fire casting dancing shadows that hollowed out his cheeks. He looked ravaged. Not physically, but as if something inside him was slowly being devoured. His eyes, when they finally lifted to mine, held a fatigue that went beyond sleepless nights. Ilara, he said my name like it was a stone in his mouth. Alpha. I kept my gaze lowered, my posture submissive, an Omega's armor. 7 candidates, he began, his voice a low rasp. 7 failures, the council's patience is at an end. They will choose a Luna for me if I do not name one by the next full moon. I remained silent. What could I possibly say to this? The trial, he turned to stare into the flames. It is not what they believe. It does not test strength or bloodline or political acumen. It tests something else entirely. Something I fear only a wolf who has lost everything might understand. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. Why are you telling me this? He looked at me then, and for a fleeting moment, the arrogant Alpha was gone. In his place was just a man, burdened and desperate. Because you will take the trial, Ilara, you will be the 8th candidate. The room tilted. I actually stumbled back a step. You cannot be serious. I am an Omega. I am rejected. This is cruelty, even for you. It is necessity. The word cracked through the room like a whip, and his alpha power surged, pressing down on me. I locked my knees to keep from buckling. The pack needs stability. The northern borders grow unstable. Rumors of something stirring in the deep woods. I need a Luna who can pass this damned trial, and you are the only option I have left. An option you already threw away. The words tore from me, sharp with a year's worth of buried pain. His jaw tightened. The trial is at dawn tomorrow. That is an Alpha's command. The finality of it stole my breath. An Alpha's command was law. To refuse was to exile oneself. And when I fail... I whispered, the fight draining out of me, leaving only a familiar, weary emptiness. When I fail as spectacularly as those perfect she-wolves, what then? More public humiliation? Will you finally cast me out completely? He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping so close I could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. You won't fail. How can you possibly know that? His gaze searched my face, looking for something he wouldn't name. Because the trial requires a wolf who knows the weight of a broken bond, who understands that worth isn't shouted from the rooftops but whispered in the ruins. You have lived in the ruins, Ilara. Now prove you can see the truth buried there. He turned his back, dismissing me. Dawn, do not be late. Ronan escorted me out into the twilight. I walked back to my cottage in a daze, the chill of the coming night nothing compared to the ice in my veins. Dawn would bring the trial. The same trial that broke warriors and made Alpha's daughters weep. But as I lit the single lamp in my lonely home, a strange, defiant spark ignited in the cold ashes of my heart. Kalen thought he was forcing me into another crucible. He saw me as a tool, a last resort. He was wrong. I had already survived the worst the world could do to a wolf. I had survived being unwanted. Whatever this trial held, it was just another storm. And I had learned how to stand in the rain. If you're already hoping Ilara proves them all wrong, let me know by giving this story a like. It tells the algorithm there are more readers like you who need to hear about strength that comes from the unlikeliest of places. Dawn arrived, pale and indifferent. I wore the same simple gray dress I'd worn the day before. No pretense, no attempt to be something I was. Let them see the Omega they'd all dismissed. The pack had gathered again, their curiosity a palpable force. Their stares were a physical pressure, pity, contempt, morbid fascination. Watch the rejected one fall. Ronan met me at the foot of the lodge steps, his expression grim. The Alpha awaits in the sacred grove, he said, bypassing the lodge entirely and leading me around back, onto a narrow path that wound into the oldest part of the forest. The grove, I thought the trial was held in the lodge. The public interviews were, the true trial is older, it has not been administered in my lifetime. The path descended. The ancient oaks grew so thick they blotted out the morning sun, their gnarled roots like bones breaking through the skin of the earth. The air grew heavy and still, smelling of damp moss and old stone. We stopped before a hillside shrouded in ivy. Ronan brushed the vines aside to reveal a stone archway, its lintel carved with runes that made my wolf whimper in recognition of something primal. "The Chamber of Echoes," Ronan murmured. "Good luck, Alara, you will need it." He stepped back and a profound silence swallowed the forest. I stepped through the arch into darkness. Torches flared to life along a circular wall of sheer rock, not with flame but with a cool, silver phosphorescence. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. And in the center, standing beside a stone altar that held 3 simple objects, was Kalen. He looked like a stranger here. The lodge's formality was gone. He wore plain, dark clothes, and the alpha power that usually radiated from him was tightly coiled, restrained. It made him seem more dangerous, not less. "You came," he said, his voice echoing softly in the cavernous space. "An alpha's command is difficult to refuse." The others refused in their own ways. They came to the lodge, but their hearts stayed behind, armored in their pride and expectations. He gestured to the altar. "This is the true trial. It has 3 parts, 3 truths you must face. Fail anyone and the trial ends." I approached the altar. On it lay a circlet of woven willow, a chalice of dark wood, and a smooth river stone, black as midnight. "What must I do?" "The trial does not test what you can do, it reveals who you are." He picked up the willow circlet. "The first echo tests mercy, not the mercy you show to the strong, but the mercy you grant to the truly broken, even when they have harmed you." He held it out. "Place this on your head and the vision will come." My hands trembled as I took the fragile circlet. It felt alive, humming with a subtle energy. I placed it on my brow. The world dissolved. Vision 1, the traitor's price. I stood on a wind-scoured cliff edge under a bruised twilight sky. Below, the nightfall pack's territory spread out like a tapestry. Before me, bound in silver-chained ropes that smoked against his skin, knelt a wolf I recognized, Jareth, a delta from the Border Patrol. His face was a mask of anguish and defiance. "He sold our patrol routes to the rival Ridgewood pack for a chest of gold," a voice growled. Kalen stood beside me, but not the Kalen of the chamber. This was Alpha Kalen in full regalia, his eyes burning with cold fury. "3 of our scouts are dead because of his treachery. Our law is clear, death for oath breakers." I looked at Jareth, saw not just a traitor, but the desperation in his eyes, the shame. "Why?" I heard myself ask. His voice was a broken thing. "My daughter, she has the wasting sickness. The healers said only the sun-blessed elixir from the southern clans could save her. It cost more than I could earn in 10 lifetimes. I saw no other way." He bowed his head, a sob wrenching from his chest. "I am guilty, I deserve death, but please, Alpha, my child is innocent. Let the gold go to her care. Let my death be the last thing she must pay for." The law was absolute. Justice demanded his life. His motives did not erase the blood on his hands. But mercy whispered a different truth. Mercy asked which was the greater act of leadership, upholding the law with brutal consistency, or recognizing that sometimes justice must be tempered with compassion to remain just. Kalen's spectral hand rested on the hilt of his dagger. "Your judgment, Luna." The word Luna hung in the air. This was the test, not to judge the crime, but to judge the heart behind it, to weigh the value of a life against the value of a law. I looked at the broken wolf before me, then at the Alpha poised to deliver death. "The law must stand," I said, and Jareth flinched. "But let it be a prison of healing, not a grave. Confiscate the gold for the healer's use and for his daughter's care. Let his life be a sentence of service and atonement, not an end. Let him live every day remembering the cost of his choice, and let that memory be a sharper punishment than any blade." The spectral Kalen studied me, then gave a slow nod. The sentence is commuted. Life for life, his service for his daughter's future. The cliff edge, the traitor, the alpha, all shattered like glass. I gasped, stumbling back into the present. The willow circlet lay cool on my forehead. Kalen was watching me, his real eyes wide in the torchlight. "The first candidate," he said, his voice hushed. "Lyra," she said, "a traitor's blood waters the roots of loyalty." She demanded immediate execution. The vision ended for her there. "What happened to Jareth?" I asked, my heart still pounding. "In life. He was executed years before my time, under my father's rule. His daughter died of the wasting sickness a month later." Kalen's gaze was intense. "You saw a different path, one where the pack's strength comes from redemption, not just retribution." He reached for the wooden chalice. "The second echo tests justice, not the easy justice of the powerful, but the hard justice that must sometimes be served against those you love." The chalice was filled with a clear liquid that smelled of rainwater and sorrow. "Drink." I took the chalice, my reflection wavering in the dark liquid. I drank. It tasted of tears. Vision 2, the protectors lie. The scene shifted to the pack healing wards. The air smelled of herbs and pain. On a cot lay a young warrior, his leg mangled from a training accident. My heart clenched. It was Ronan, decades younger, and bending over him, her hands glowing with gentle healing light, was a she-wolf whose face stole my breath. Liana, Kalen's mother, the previous Luna. "The bone is shattered, Ronan," Liana said, her voice soft with strain. "The regular healing will leave you with a permanent limp. You will never run at full speed again, never lead the border patrol." Ronan's face, pale with pain, set into grim lines. "Then my life as a warrior is over." "There is another way," Liana whispered, glancing toward the ward entrance. "A forbidden technique, Bone Weaver's Kiss. It can mend this completely, but it draws life energy from the healer. It is banned because it has killed those who attempted it." "Luna, no, you are the best of us, Ronan. The pack cannot lose you to this." Her hands glowed brighter, taking on a dangerous golden hue. "I am strong, I can bear the cost." "Mother, stop," I whirled. A young Kalen, perhaps 16, stood in the doorway, his face white with horror. He rushed forward, grabbing her wrists. "You'll kill yourself, the law forbids it." "The law does not understand necessity," Liana cried, struggling against him. "This is Ronan, he is family." "And you are my mother, you are the Luna," young Kalen's voice broke. "If you die for this, what justice is that? What message does it send? That some wolves are above the laws that protect us all?" I watched, torn. Liana's love was a fierce, self-sacrificing flame. She wanted to save a beloved pack member. Kalen's stance was one of rigid, terrified principle. He wanted to save his mother and the integrity of the law itself. The vision focused on me, the silent observer given a voice. "Your judgment, Luna. Does love justify breaking sacred law? Does law demand we watch good wolves fall when we could save them?" This was the torment of leadership, the choice between the heart and the oath. I saw Liana's desperate love. I saw Kalen's fear and his unwavering respect for order. I saw Ronan, willing to accept his fate to keep his Luna safe. "The law stands," I said, the words aching in my throat, "not because the law is more important than Ronan's leg, but because it is more important than the precedent its breaking sets. If a Luna can break it for love, then an alpha can break it for ambition, a healer for greed. The law is the shield for the weak, and it must be unbroken to hold." I looked at Liana, my vision blurring, but justice is not cold. "Find another way, gather every healer, research every scroll, exhaust every legal possibility before you accept defeat. The law must be the boundary, not the barrier to our compassion." The healing ward dissolved. I was on my knees in the chamber, tears streaming down my face. The empty chalice rolled from my hand. Kalen knelt before me, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Seraphina," he said hoarsely. "She chose my mother's path, said love was the highest law. The vision ended for her there." He took a shaky breath. In truth, my mother attempted the bone weaver's kiss that night in secret. It did not kill her, but it left her weakened. She caught a fever that winter and never recovered. Ronan kept his limp. The weight of the story crushed me. His mother's death a result of that impossible choice, Ronan's lifelong reminder. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words utterly inadequate. He stood, brushing stone dust from his knees, his mask back in place. 2 echoes survived, 1 remains. He picked up the Black River stone. It seemed to drink the light from the torches. The 3rd echo tests truth, the hardest truth, the one about yourself. He placed the cold, smooth stone in my palm and closed my fingers around it. This one shows no vision of the past. It shows the heart of the present. It reveals the lie you tell yourself. Darkness, absolute and profound, swallowed me, but this time there were no other people, no dramatic scenes. I stood in an endless, starless void. And from the darkness, my own voice echoed back at me, but twisted, sharpened into a weapon. The inner echo, the Omega's lie you believe you are strong because you endured his rejection, the voice hissed, slithering around me. You tell yourself you have built a life from the ashes. This is your lie. Images flashed, not visions from the past, but reflections of my own soul. I saw myself in the archives, not finding peaceful purpose, but hiding from pity, from connection, from any chance of being hurt again. I saw my quiet acceptance not as resilience, but as surrender. I had not claimed my worth, I had merely stopped begging others to see it. You call it survival, the voice taunted, but you have not lived. You have only waited for the pain to fade. Waited to become invisible enough to be safe. You let him define you, the rejected Omega. You wear that title like a shroud, and you have mistaken its weight for strength. The truth of it was a physical blow. It was right. I had accepted the verdict of that moonlit night. I had internalized Kaelin's rejection as a final judgment on my worth. My entire existence had become a careful dance around that central, devastating fact. The trial does not seek a perfect Luna, the voice whispered, now softer, almost sorrowful. It seeks an honest one, a Luna who can face the ugly truths in the pack and in herself. You have seen mercy and justice clearly. Now see yourself. Who are you, Alara, when no one is watching, when the labels of Omega and rejected are stripped away? In the void, with my deepest lie exposed, I had nothing left to hide behind. I was not just an Omega, I was not just rejected. I was a wolf who loved quiet stories in old books, who found joy in the first frost on a spiderweb, whose loyalty, once given, was unshakable, who had a capacity for compassion that no amount of shame had been able to extinguish. I had let a single, searing moment eclipse all of that. I am Alara, I said aloud to the void, my voice small but clear. I am more than what was done to me. My worth is not his to give or take, it is mine, and it does not fade. The Black River stone grew warm in my hand, then hot. A pure silver light erupted from between my fingers, piercing the void. It filled the darkness, not with vision, but with a profound, quiet certainty. The chamber of echoes returned. I was standing, the stone's light fading to a gentle pulse. Kaelin stared at me as if he had never seen me before. The torchlight reflected in his eyes, showing something like awe and a deep, unsettling vulnerability. You passed, he breathed. All 3 echoes, mercy, justice, truth. He took a step closer. No one has ever held the stone of self and made it shine. It reveals the lie. Only by accepting the truth does the light come. The weight of what had just happened settled over me. I had passed an ancient, mystical trial that had defeated 7 superior candidates. I had faced the darkest corners of my own soul and not looked away. The other candidates, I asked, my voice raw. In this last test, they defended their lies, Kaelin said simply. Lyra insisted her harshness was strength. Seraphina claimed her manipulative charm was diplomacy. They clung to their false selves, and the stone remained dark. It cannot be tricked. He reached out as if to touch my arm, then let his hand fall. You asked me yesterday how I knew you wouldn't fail. I didn't know, I only hoped, because the northern darkness is coming, Alara, not a rival pack, something older, something that feeds on fear and deception. The pack needs a Luna who can see clearly in here, he tapped his temple, and in here. He pressed a fist to his chest, it needs you. The word hung between us, not as a mate, that bridge was ash, but as a Luna. The council, I began, overwhelmed, will have to accept it. The trial's verdict is absolute. He finally closed the distance, his gaze earnest and fierce. But I will not command this, Alara, not again. The position is yours by right, but you must choose it. Will you be Luna of the Nightfall pack? I looked from his intense face to the ancient chamber around us, to the stone, now dormant, in my palm. I thought of the pack above, of their scorn and their need. I thought of my quiet cottage and the fragile peace I had built. The third echo had asked me who I was when no one was watching. The answer was simple: I was a wolf who cared, deeply, foolishly. Who loved her pack even when it did not love her back. I met Kaelin's stormy eyes. I will. What would you choose, safety in solitude or a terrifying duty born from painful truth? Let me know in the comments. And if you're invested in Alara's journey, show your support with a like. It helps this story find its pack. The walk back from the sacred grove was a blur of dappled sunlight and roaring silence in my own head. Ronan waited at the stone arch, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly when he saw me emerge beside Kaelin, whole and seemingly sane. He said nothing, falling into step behind us as we ascended the path. The pack was still gathered in the main clearing, their murmurs dying instantly as we appeared. Kaelin did not hesitate. He stepped onto the raised wooden platform used for announcements, pulling me up beside him. The eyes of hundreds of wolves pinned me to the spot. Pack of Nightfall, his voice, amplified by Alpha Command, rolled over the crowd. The trial of echoes has been passed, all 3 challenges met. By ancient law and right, Alara stands as Luna-elect. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier than the stone in the grove, then it shattered. A cacophony of disbelief, anger, and shock erupted. Voices overlapped, sharp and jagged. And Omega, this is a mockery, she was rejected. How can a broken bond lead? Kaelin let the storm rage for a moment before releasing a pulse of alpha authority that slapped the noise into a stunned quiet. The trial judges what we cannot, it has spoken. The council will convene within the hour to formalize the succession. His gaze swept the crowd, daring anyone to contradict him. Alara is your Luna, you will afford her the respect the title demands. He stepped down, Ronan clearing a path through the muttering crowd. I moved to follow, my legs wooden, but a hand shot out, gripping my forearm. It was Lyra, the first failed candidate, her flint-like eyes blazing. A pretty trick, she hissed, low enough for only me to hear. What did you do? Appeal to his pity, his guilt. Her grip tightened. You may wear a crown, Omega, but you will never command the respect of true wolves. This pack needs strength, not whatever you are. Before I could react, another figure shouldered between us. It was an elderly she-wolf, her back bent, her hands knotted with arthritis. I recognized her, Marlene, the oldest Omega in the pack who tended the herb gardens. She is your Luna, warrior, Marlene said, her voice a dry rustle, but her eyes were clear and sharp. Unhand her. Or do the traditions of rank and respect mean nothing to you now? Lyra recoiled as if burned, releasing my arm. She shot me one last searing look of contempt before melting back into the crowd. Marlene turned to me, her wrinkled face softening. The grove does not make mistakes, child. Welcome. She gave a slow, painful-looking nod of deference before shuffling away. That small act of loyalty from the most unexpected quarter steadied me more than Kaelin's command. The council chamber was a somber room of dark wood and woven tapestries depicting pack history. The 5 council members, 3 elders, and the heads of the warriors and healers were already seated around a crescent table. Kaelin stood at the head, I at his side. The air was thick with disapproval. Elder Thorn, a man whose face seemed permanently carved from granite, spoke first. Alpha Kalen, the pack is in turmoil. To name the rejected Omega as Luna, it upends the natural order. The other territories will see it as weakness. The other territories, Kalen replied coolly, are not facing what we face in the northern woods. They have not lost scouts to silent vanishings. They do not feel the rot in the earth. We need a different kind of strength. And you believe she possesses it. This from Cora, the head healer, her tone not unkind, but deeply skeptical. Ilara, you passed the trial. We accept the Grove's wisdom, but passing a test and leading a pack are different things. What is your first command as Luna-elect? All eyes turned to me. My mouth was dry. I could feel the ghost of Lyra's grip on my arm, hear the pack's jeers. I clasped my hands to hide their trembling and reached for the honesty the stone of self had demanded. I command nothing, I said, my voice quieter than I wished. Not yet, I would ask, I would listen. I looked at each council member in turn. You know this pack, its rhythms and needs, far better than I, Elder Thorn. You worry about our standing. How can we project strength that is real, not just for show? Cora, your healers are our lifeblood. What do you need to prepare for trouble? Ronan, I turned to the beta who stood by the door. The warriors are restless. How do we channel that energy into vigilant protection, not internal strife? The council stared nonplussed. They had expected grand decrees or cowering uncertainty, not questions. Kalen watched me, a faint, unreadable curve to his lips. Elder Thorn cleared his throat. A Luna who listens before she speaks is unusual, but not without wisdom. He leaned forward, the Ridgewood pack to the east. They see our failed Luna candidates as a sign of instability. A show of force, a joint patrol along our shared border would remind them of our resolve. A show of force can be seen as a provocation, I said carefully, the memory of the first echo, mercy, fresh in my mind. What of a show of unity instead? Invite them to the Luna ceremony. Let them see a pack standing together behind its leaders, not divided, strength in cohesion, not just in claws. A slow nod from Thorn, that has merit. Cora spoke next, my supplies are low. Silverthorn for fever, moonwort for deep wounds. The blight in the northern woods has killed the usual patches. Then we find new patches, I said. Organize foraging parties with warrior escorts, not just healers. Include Omegas who know the forest plants. Share the knowledge so it is not lost. The meeting continued, the tension gradually easing from a solid wall into a navigable current. I asked, they advised, we debated. Kalen intervened only once to settle a dispute over patrol rotations. He did not override me, he supported the compromise we had reached. When the council was dismissed, the mood was one of grudging acceptance rather than open rebellion. I had not won them over, but I had given them no immediate reason to tear me down. Alone with Kalen in the chamber, the exhaustion hit me like a physical wave. I sank into a chair. You asked questions, he said, moving to pour 2 cups of water from a pitcher. It was all I had, I admitted. I don't know how to command armies or dictate policy. I only know how to see people, to listen. That, he said, handing me a cup, is where you are wrong. That is not all you have. It is the very thing the pack has been missing. He drank, watching me over the rim. My father ruled with an iron fist. I have tried to rule with fairness, but always from a distance, from the top down. You see the threads between us. The echo of mercy proved that. The mention of the visions brought a new tension into the room. The things I saw, Jareth, your mother, they were real memories, echoes of pivotal moments where pack law and pack heart collided. The grove draws them from the collective memory of the land, I think. It shows them to see how a potential Luna's soul resonates. He set his cup down. You saw paths my father and even I did not take, better paths. They were just visions, Kalen, ideas. Ideas change the world, he said quietly. The ceremony will be in 3 days at the full moon. There are preparations, a dress, rituals. The thought of a formal ceremony of standing before the entire pack as their Luna sent a fresh bolt of panic through me. Must it be so public, so soon? The pack needs the symbol. The ritual solidifies the bond between Luna and pack just as the mate bond. He stopped, the unspoken words hanging in the air, just as the mate bond would have. He cleared his throat. It is important. Ronan's mate, Althea, will help you. She oversees such things. I simply nodded, too tired to argue. Althea, a warm, capable she-wolf with kind eyes, found me in the small guest chamber I'd been given in the lodge, no longer the Omega in the cottage, not yet the Luna in the royal quarters. She carried bolts of fabric and a no-nonsense attitude. "We'll make it simple, dignified," she said, holding up a deep, forest-green silk against me. It speaks of the pack lands, not gaudy royalty. The crown will be woven willow from the sacred grove itself. A crown. The word felt foreign on my tongue. A circlet like the one from your trial, but permanent, a living thing. Her eyes met mine. "Ronan told me what you did in the council, asking questions. That was smart, it's a start. But a crown, even a willow one, makes you a target. Are you ready for that?" "No," I said honestly, "but the stone showed me I've been hiding. I suppose it's time to stop." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of fittings, lessons in ritual etiquette, and a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. I walked through the pack lands trying to show myself, to be seen. Reactions were mixed. Some, like Marlene, offered respectful nods. Warriors often turned their backs. Omegas watched me with a mixture of hope and fear. On the eve of the ceremony, I slipped away to my old cottage. It felt smaller, like a shell I had outgrown. I was gathering the few personal items I wanted: a book of pressed flowers from my mother, a smooth stone I'd found as a child when a shadow filled the doorway. "Kalen," he looked out of place in the modest space. "I thought I might find you here." "Saying goodbye to hiding," I said, not turning around. He was silent for a long moment. "Ilara, about the rejection, the bond." I froze, my hand closing around the cool stone. "Don't. I have to now, before tomorrow." His voice was rough. "It wasn't you." "It was never you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "That's what everyone says when they break something precious. It's not you, it's me. In this case, it's a literal truth." He stepped inside, forcing me to face him. In the dim light, his face was all stark angles and shadows. When the bond snapped into place, I felt it. It was perfect, and it terrified me. Because for years, the elders, my father before he died, they drilled a prophecy into me. A warning from a half-mad seer generations ago. The alpha who bonds with the gentle heart in the time of the growing shadow will seal his pack's doom. Strength must wed strength, or all will fall to decay. The words landed like stones in the quiet room. "The gentle heart and Omega, you rejected me because of a prophecy." I was young, new to the alpha power. The weight of the entire pack felt like it was crushing me. The elders said the growing shadow was a metaphor for rival packs, for internal strife. They said bonding with an Omega with you would show fatal weakness, that it would doom us all. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure agitation. I thought I was being noble, choosing the pack over my own heart, over you. The anger that rose in me was cold and clear. "You chose my suffering to soothe your fear. You didn't even ask me. You didn't trust me with the truth. You just broke us and left me in the dark to blame myself." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "I know, there is no excuse, only explanation, and I have lived with the consequences every day since. The bond didn't just shatter for you, it tore something in me too, a constant, aching absence." He took a shuddering breath. "The northern blight, the vanishing scouts, it's the growing shadow, Ilara, not a metaphor, a real, creeping darkness, and the prophecy was wrong. Rejecting you didn't stop it. It only left us weaker, divided. I was a fool." The pieces clicked together, his desperation, the trial. His need for a Luna who could pass it. He wasn't just seeking a leader, he was seeking absolution for a catastrophic mistake. "Why tell me now? Because tomorrow you swear an oath to the pack. You should do it with all the truth laid bare. You deserve that." He met my gaze, his own filled with a raw regret so deep it was almost tangible. "I do not ask for your forgiveness. I have no right." I only ask that you believe I will spend every day of my life trying to be the alpha, the partner this pack needs, to be worthy of the Luna the grove chose. I looked at him, this proud, broken man who had shattered my world and was now standing in the ruins of his own making. The mate bond was gone, that love was a phantom limb, but something else was here, a shared duty, a hard-won respect, and the brutal, unvarnished truth. The past is a locked room, Kaelin, I said finally, my voice tired but steady. We can't go back and open the door, we can only build a new house beside it. Let's build one strong enough to weather the coming shadow. He nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. Together, it wasn't forgiveness, it was a truce, a foundation. He left me in the quiet cottage. I picked up my mother's book of flowers, the pressed blossoms fragile and enduring. I had survived the breaking. Now I had to learn how to build, and tomorrow, before the pack and the full moon, I would take the first real step. Not as the rejected Omega, but as Alara, as Luna. The willow crown awaited. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and cold. The lodge was a hive of subdued activity, a current of anticipation and skepticism running beneath the surface. Althea helped me into the forest green gown. It was indeed simple, but the silk fell in elegant lines, and the embroidery at the cuffs and hem, silver thread forming intricate patterns of wolves and oak leaves, hinted at a quiet authority. It felt like armor made of river reeds and moonlight. "It suits you," Althea said, stepping back to survey her work. "It doesn't wear you, you wear it." The distinction was important. I was not playing dress-up. I was stepping into a role that was, terrifyingly, becoming my own. As twilight approached, the pack gathered in the sacred clearing, the same one where my life had fractured over a year before. Torches were lit, pushing back the deepening violet of the sky. The full moon rose, a giant silver coin edging above the trees, its light both beautiful and merciless. I waited at the edge of the trees, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could see them all, the council, the warriors in formal leathers, the families, the Omegas clustered at the back. Marlene gave me a small, encouraging smile from her place among them. Kaelin stood on a natural stone dais in the center of the clearing, dressed in black and silver, the alpha's torque gleaming at his throat. He looked every inch the ruler, remote and powerful. But when his eyes found mine in the shadows, I saw the same tension that coiled in my own stomach. A deep horn sounded, its note vibrating in the cool air. Silence fell. This was it. I walked. The path from the tree line to the dais felt 1,000 miles long. Every whisper of silk, every crunch of gravel under my slippers was deafening. Hundreds of eyes tracked my progress. I kept my chin level, my gaze fixed on Kaelin, using him as a lodestone. I reached the dais. He offered his hand. I took it, his grip firm and warm. No bond sparked between us, only the solid pressure of a pact. "Pack of Nightfall," he began, his voice resonating with alpha power that seemed to draw strength from the moon itself. "We gather under the watchful eye of our mother moon to witness the binding of a Luna to her pack. The ancient trial has been passed. The will of the grove is clear. Does any here challenge this outcome?" He paused, letting the challenge hang. I saw Lyra's jaw tighten, but she remained silent. The law was absolute. To challenge the trial's result was to challenge centuries of tradition. Then let the covenant be made. Kaelin released my hand and turned to an elder who held a wooden tray. Upon it lay the willow crown, not the fragile circlet from the trial, but a stronger, beautifully woven piece, its slender branches still bearing a few silvery leaves. It hummed with a gentle, living magic. "Alara," Kaelin said, his formal tone softening just for me. "Do you swear to lead this pack with mercy, to see the heart behind the action?" The first echo, "I swear." "Do you swear to uphold justice, to bear the weight of law even when it pains you for the protection of all?" The second echo, "I swear." "Do you swear to walk in truth, to never hide from the darkness within or without, and to guide this pack with a clear and honest spirit?" The third echo, "My truth, I swear." he lifted the crown. Then by earth, by moon, and by the sacred echoes of this grove, I name you Luna of the Nightfall Pack. He placed the willow crown upon my head. It was surprisingly light, but the moment it touched my brow, the world changed. It wasn't like the mate bond, a single blazing connection. This was a vast, intricate web, hundreds of delicate threads snapped into existence in my mind's eye, each one connecting my core to a member of the pack. I felt them, a dizzying rush of emotions, thoughts, flickers of consciousness. Ronan's steadfast loyalty, Althea's hopeful warmth, Elder Thorn's cautious approval, Lyra's simmering resentment, Marlene's quiet pride, the simple hunger of a child, the weariness of a hunter, the anxiety of a sentry on the northern border, the Luna bond, a connection to every soul in the territory. It was overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful. It was responsibility made tangible. I swayed, and Kaelin's hand was back on my elbow, steadying me. "Breathe," he murmured for my ears alone. "Let it settle. Don't try to listen to every voice. Feel the chorus." I focused on my breath, on the solid stone beneath my feet. Slowly, the cacophony of individual threads softened into a harmonious hum, the collective spirit of Nightfall Pack. It was strong, but beneath the strength I felt a new, discordant note, a thread of cold fear coming from the north. The sentry's anxiety wasn't just personal, it was an echo of something out there. The pack, feeling the bond settle into place through their own connections, began to howl. It started with the warriors, a deep, respectful chorus, then spread through the ranks until every wolf, even the skeptical ones, added their voice to the moonlit song. It was acceptance, not born of love for me, but of respect for the ritual, for the bonds that now undeniably linked us. The ceremony shifted to feasting and music. I was paraded around, introduced, toasted. I smiled until my face ached, accepted blessings, and felt the constant, background hum of the pack bonds. It was exhausting, but also illuminating. I could feel the shift in real time. As wolves spoke to me, saw me standing firm, some of their skepticism began to melt into curiosity and a few into tentative respect. It was near midnight when Kaelin found me by the refreshment table, grabbing a moment's respite. "You're holding up," he observed. "Barely. It's like hearing everyone's heartbeat at once. You'll learn to focus, to listen when you need to." He glanced toward the northern tree line, his expression darkening. "Come, there's something you need to see, now that you're bound to the land." He led me away from the firelight and music, down a path that led to the highest watchtower on the northern ridge. Ronan followed at a discreet distance. From the top of the wooden tower, the pack territory spread out below us, bathed in silver moonlight. And beyond our marked borders, to the north, the sight stole my breath. Where the healthy, dark green forest of our lands ended, a sickness began. The trees in the distance were not just blighted, they were wrong. Their branches twisted in unnatural, agonized shapes, and a faint, phosphorescent gray moss clung to them, emitting a sickly glow. The very air over that section of forest seemed thicker, darker, swallowing the moonlight. "The growing shadow," I whispered. "It advances a little each week," Kaelin said, his voice grim. "Scouts who go too deep into that area don't come back. Those who skirt the edges report a silence so complete it hurts the ears, and a feeling of being watched by something old and hungry." Through the Luna bond, I reached for the thread of the northern sentry. His fear was a sharp, cold spike. He wasn't just afraid of the unknown, he was afraid of the feeling, a creeping despair that leaked from the corrupted woods, a voice that wasn't a voice suggesting it was pointless to stand guard, pointless to fight. "It attacks the mind," I said, understanding dawning. "The prophecies decay, it's not physical rot first, it's despair, it breaks the will." Kaelin stared at me. "How did you know?" "I can feel it, through the bond, the sentry, he's fighting not just watchfulness but hopelessness." I turned to him, the weight of the crown suddenly feeling like the weight of the coming storm. "The other packs that fell to the north, did they report fighting, battles?" He frowned. "Few. Mostly they just went silent, as if they gave up." They did give up. This shadow, it feeds on strength because strength is born of will. It erodes the will to resist. The lessons of the trial crystallized. Mercy, justice, truth, they are all facets of a strong spirit, a resilient will. The trial wasn't just choosing a Luna. It was preparing one for this. The realization was both terrifying and clarifying. The grove, the echoes, had chosen not despite my brokenness, but because of it. I had already had my will tested in the fire of rejection and survived. I had learned to find strength in honesty, not just in power. We can't fight despair with swords, I said. Then how? With connection. I looked out at the pack below, at the threads of light binding us. The Luna bond, it's not just for me to lead. It's a web, we can use it to share strength, to remind each other of our reasons to fight when the hopelessness comes, to prove we are not alone. Kaelin was silent for a long moment, studying the shadowed woods and then me. You see a path already. I see the tools we have. I touched the willow crown. This connects me to the pack. The pack bonds connect us to each other. The shadow seeks to isolate and corrupt. We must do the opposite. We must bind ourselves tighter, in truth. Without the lies of pretended strength, a shout from below broke the intensity. Ronan pointed north, a flicker of movement at the tree line, a wolf, staggering, emerging from the corrupted woods. We descended the tower at a run. By the time we reached the clearing's edge, warriors had surrounded the newcomer. It was a young male, his pelt matted with the glowing gray moss, his eyes wide and unseeing with terror. He was from the neighboring Frostfang pack, a territory that lay directly north of the Blight. He collapsed before he could speak. Cora, the head healer, was there in moments. She cleaned the moss from his fur, but it left behind weeping, gray-tinged sores. The wolf shifted back to human form, a boy really, no more than 18. It's in my head, he rasped, clawing at his own temples. The whispering, it says to stop running, to lie down, that the cold is peace, that we're already dead. I knelt beside him, ignoring Cora's warning look. I placed a hand on his fevered brow. Through the Luna bond, I couldn't connect to him directly. He wasn't of my pack, but I could project calm, I could project presence. You are not dead, I said, my voice low and firm, pouring conviction into the words. You are here, with us, you outran it, you chose to run. That is strength, his wild eyes focused on mine on the willow crown. Luna, he whispered, as if the concept was foreign. Yes, you are safe now, the whispering is a lie, listen to my voice instead. Slowly, the frantic terror in his eyes receded a fraction. He gripped my hand like a lifeline. Frostfang, it's gone. The Alpha, he tried to fight it. He roared at the shadows, and they swallowed his roar, then his courage. He just sat down. Everyone started giving up. A tear cut through the grime on his cheek. I ran, I heard the whispers too, but I thought of my sister south in the Sun Haven pack. I had to tell someone. The pack had gathered, listening in horrified silence. The tangible evidence of the threat, the boy's shattered state, was more effective than any warning. Kaelin's face was stone. We are next. I stood, the boy's hand still in mine. I looked at my pack, feeling their fear through the bond. This was the moment. Not the ceremony, but this. The shadow comes, I said, my voice carrying without alpha power, but with the certainty of the bond we now shared. It brings despair. It tells us we are alone, that fighting is futile. It is a liar. I tightened my grip on the boy's hand. We have faced lies before. We have survived brokenness. Our strength has never come from never falling. It comes from standing back up. Together, this bond between us, I placed my other hand over my heart, is our shield. Your hope is my strength, my resolve is yours. We will not be isolated. We will not listen to the whisper. We will remind each other every day what we fight for. I looked at the young warrior from Frostfang. You fought for your sister. That is a truth stronger than any shadow. I looked at Marlene. We fight for our gardens, our stories, our home. I looked at Kaelin and saw a flicker of fierce pride in his gaze. We fight for each other. The fear in the bond didn't vanish, but it was joined by a new thread, determination. Solidarity. the first fragile weapon against the coming despair. The shadow was at our door, but tonight, under the full moon, we had not just crowned a Luna. We had forged the first link in a chain of will, and we would not break. The Frostfang survivor, whose name was Finn, was taken to the healing wards. The gray moss, Cora confirmed, was both a physical blight and a psychic vector. It carried the shadow's whispering despair. It took all her skill and a poultice made from moon-blessed silverthorn to halt its spread on his skin. The infection in his mind would take longer to heal. His arrival changed everything. The abstract threat in the north had a face, a voice, a story of utter collapse. The pack's mood the morning after my ceremony was somber, the festive energy replaced by a tense, focused anxiety. The Luna bond hummed with it, a low, discordant note I was learning to identify. My first official act as Luna was not a grand decree. I went to the archives. If we were to fight an ancient, creeping despair, we needed knowledge. I spent hours with the oldest scrolls and ledgers looking for anything about the growing shadow, mind blights, or old tales of forests that sowed hopelessness. I found fragments. A bard's song about the gray whisperers that drained the joy from a kingdom. A healer's journal from 3 centuries past mentioning a sorrow moss that appeared after a great tragedy. Legend said it fed on strong emotion, particularly fear and doubt, and could only be pushed back by a unified heart. It was folklore, not a manual, but it confirmed my instincts. This was a battle of spirit. My second act was to call a meeting, but not of the council. I asked Althea to gather a different group, Marlene and the senior Omegas, the pack's best storytellers and lore keepers, the weavers and cooks, those who held the day-to-day heart of the pack. They assembled in a sunlit common room, eyeing me with a mix of reverence and nervousness. I sat among them, not at the head of the table. The shadow doesn't care about battle formations, I began. It cares about loneliness. It wants us to feel isolated in our fear. So we are going to fight it with connection, with memory. I laid out my idea. We need to remind each other constantly why Nightfall is worth fighting for, not with speeches but with stories, with shared moments. I looked at the storytellers. I want tales of pack resilience circulated, not just victories in battle, but stories of survival through harsh winters, of kindness after loss, of small acts of courage. I turned to the weavers. Can you make tokens? Simple cords braided with specific herbs, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage, that we can distribute, something physical to hold onto, a tactile reminder of the pack bond. Marlene's eyes gleamed. The old ones used to do something similar. Heartstrings, they called them. Woven by the light of a shared fire, imbued with good intentions for the wearer. Perfect, I said. We start tonight, a gathering, not mandatory, for anyone who is afraid, who needs reminding. We'll share a simple meal, tell stories, and weave these heartstrings for our warriors on the northern border, for anyone feeling the weight. The women exchanged glances, then nods. A sense of purpose filled the room. They had a role. They were not just passive civilians, they were weavers of our first defense. Word spread quickly. The idea of a non-military strategy was met with bewilderment by some warriors, but curiosity by many others. That evening, by the central fire pit, a crowd gathered, not the whole pack, but a good number. Omegas, elders, some off-duty warriors, parents with children. I didn't stand and give another speech. I sat on a log and asked an elder to tell the story of the long winter, when the pack survived on little more than shared determination and clever foraging. As he spoke, the weavers passed out simple cords and began teaching others how to braid. The rhythmic, communal activity was soothing. The shared story was anchoring. I felt it through the Luna bond. The knot of fear in the pack's collective spirit loosened just a little. It was replaced by a warm, humming thread of solidarity. Kalen watched from the shadows of the lodge porch, Ronan beside him. Later, he found me as I was helping clean up. Heartstrings and stories, he said, his tone neutral. The first threads of our will, I replied, not defensively. You cannot command hope into existence, Alpha. You have to cultivate it. He was silent for a moment. The northern patrols report the blight has advanced another 100 yards since yesterday. The whispers are louder. 2 sentries had to be relieved after reporting severe apathy and thoughts of simply walking into the woods. The cold reality slammed back. Then we move faster. The heartstrings are for them first, and we need to get word to the other packs. Frostfang is gone. Ridgewood to the east, Sunhaven to the south, the western clans, they need to know it's not a local problem. They need to know despair is the weapon. They will see it as weakness, Kalen said, admitting fear. Then we frame it as intelligence, a warning about enemy tactics. I met his gaze. The lone wolf dies, Kalen, the pack survives. We need to start thinking of the other territories not as rivals, but as the larger pack, or this shadow will pick us off one by one. He looked at me, and in the moonlight I saw not the rejecting Alpha nor the desperate leader, but a partner truly seeing the scope of the battlefield. You're right, I'll send envoys at dawn, discreetly, but you should prepare for the council's reaction. Thorn will call it naive outreach. Lyra will call it begging. Let them. While they debate politics, we will be building walls of memory and connection, and we will start training. Training for what? For psychological siege. The idea had been forming all day. We can't just tell our wolves to resist despair. We have to train them how. Meditation to focus the mind. Paired sentry duty so no one is alone with the whispers for too long. Codes of phrases that mean I'm losing hope so they can ask for help without shame. We treat this like any other threat we drill. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. You're turning our greatest weakness, our emotional bonds, into our fortress. It was never a weakness, I said softly. You were just taught it was. The next few days were a whirlwind. The heartstring gatherings became a nightly ritual, growing larger each time. The weavers couldn't keep up with demand. Warriors began to wear the braided cords around their wrists or necks. It was a symbol, a flag of solidarity. I implemented the buddy system for northern patrols and started basic mental focus exercises with Ronan's help. The initial resistance from some warriors was stiff, but when Finn, the Frostfang survivor, weakly joined one session and spoke haltingly about how hearing his sister's name in his head was the only thread that pulled him back from the whispering void, attitudes began to shift. Lyra remained a vocal critic. She cornered me one afternoon as I was returning from the healing wards where I'd spent time with Finn. Weaving bracelets and telling stories while the forest dies, she sneered. The other packs will think we've gone soft. That our Luna is a child playing with feelings. I stopped, feeling the pack bonds around me drawing strength from their myriad threads. Tell me, Lyra, what is your greatest strength? She blinked, thrown. My skill, my resolve, my ability to protect this pack with force. And when the shadow comes and whispers that your skill is meaningless, that your resolve is a joke, that the pack isn't worth protecting, what will you hold on to? Your sword. I held up my own wrist with its simple braided cord. I will hold on to the memory of Marlene's hands teaching me this, the sound of the elder's story by the fire, the knowledge that I am one thread in a web that includes every wolf here, including you. That is what I am giving them. Not just a weapon to hold, but a reason to wield it. She stared at me, her contempt faltering, replaced by a flicker of something else, uncertainty. She had no answer. She turned and walked away, but her dismissal lacked its usual heat. The true test came a week after the ceremony. A patrol on the northern border, a young warrior named Bren and his more experienced buddy, Terk, encountered an anomalous fog, a gray, silent mist that rolled out from the blighted trees. Through the Luna bond, I felt it the moment it touched them. A sudden, icy dampening of their spirits, a wash of intrusive, hopeless thoughts. I was in the middle of a council meeting, arguing for more resources for the weavers and storytellers, when the sensation hit me like a wave of nausea. I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. Ilara, Kalen was on his feet instantly. The Northern Patrol, Bren, Terk, the Shadow is testing them. Now, I closed my eyes, focusing on the two threads in the bond that were growing cold and thin. I poured my own will down the connection, not to command, but to remind. I sent them the memory of the heartstring gathering, the taste of shared stew, the sound of laughter, the feeling of a braided cord between my fingers. In the council chamber, I spoke aloud, my voice distant as I focused inward. Hold on, Bren. Remember the story of the Stonepaw Howl? Terk, your daughter just learned to braid. She made a cord for you. It's in your pocket. Feel it. The council watched, mesmerized and bewildered, as I fought a battle they couldn't see miles away. At the border, later reports would tell us Bren had been on the verge of dropping his weapon, of walking into the fog. Terk, older, was fighting it harder. When my voice came through the bond, not words, but sensations and memories, Bren's hand had jerked to the poorly braided, slightly messy cord in his pocket. He'd gripped it, and the memory of his daughter's concentrated face had sliced through the whispering fog. He'd grabbed Terk's arm, shouted their prearranged code phrase, "The fire is low," and they had backed away step by step until the fog's influence faded. The threads in my bond warmed, strengthening with relief and shaky triumph. I opened my eyes, sweat beading on my brow. The council was silent. "They're safe," I breathed. They held. Elder Thorn looked from me to Kalen, his skepticism replaced by dawning comprehension. "The bond, you used it, like a lifeline." "It is a lifeline," I said, exhausted but exhilarated. "The first one has been tested, and it held." That night the story of Bren and Terk spread through the pack like wildfire. The heartstrings weren't just symbols, they were anchors. The buddy system wasn't just procedure, it was salvation. The shared stories weren't just entertainment, they were ammunition. The pack's spirit, which had been hunkered down in fear, began to lift, not into bravado, but into a firm, communal resolve. We were building our defense, one braided thread, one shared memory at a time. Kalen found me on the watchtower again, looking north. The phosphorescent gray line seemed closer. "You were right," he said simply. "About everything, the connection, the will, it's working." "It's a start," I said. "The shadow will learn, it will adapt, it will find new ways to make us doubt, to make us feel alone." I turned to him. "We need to be ready to adapt faster. We need to strengthen the bond, all of it, between us two." He understood. The partnership between Alpha and Luna had to be seamless, unbreakable. It was the central pillar of the web. "What do you need?" "Truth, always, no more secrets, no more decisions made in isolation. We lead together or we fall separately." He held out his hand, not in command but in covenant. Together, I took it. The mate bond was a ghost, but this pact of shared duty, hard-won respect, and unwavering truth was solid. It was the second thread, just as vital as the first. Below us, in the clearing, another fire was lit. The sound of storytelling and the quiet concentration of weavers drifted up on the cold air. We were weaving our will, thread by thread, into a shield no shadow could pierce. The growing shadow was coming, but Nightfall Pack was no longer sleeping. We were awake, connected, and remembering why we fought, and we would not go gently into that gray silence. The success of Bren and Terk became a turning point. The abstract concept of fighting despair became tangible. We began formalizing the training. Ronan, once skeptical, now drilled warriors in the mental shield exercises with the same intensity he applied to swordplay. Meditation circles formed at dawn and dusk, led by the lore keepers, focusing on anchoring the mind to a specific, positive memory. The heartstring production became an assembly line of hope. Children, under Marlene's guidance, gathered the herbs. Omegas and elders did the braiding, often infusing the cords with whispered blessings or hummed tunes. Each warrior heading to the northern border received one, but now they also received a memory token. A small, smooth stone from the river, a feather, a pressed flower, something personal to focus on when the gray whispers began. I felt the pack's spirit solidify through the Luna bond. It wasn't a fearless joy, but a gritty, determined resilience. The web of connection glowed brighter in my mind's eye, but a web has weak points, and the first strain came not from the north but from within. Lyra's faction, though smaller, remained vocal. They saw the focus on meditation and storytelling as a dangerous distraction from real preparation, forging more weapons, building physical barricades, training for a physical foe they could rend with their claws. The divide was symbolized one afternoon during a joint training session. Ronin had warriors paired up, one attempting to verbally undermine the other's resolve with taunts and discouragement, while the other practiced using their memory token and breathing techniques to stay focused. It was tense, emotional work. Lyra watched from the sidelines, her arms crossed. When a young warrior named Kale, no relation to the Alpha, flustered and near tears after his partner's relentless psychological assault, failed the exercise, Lyra scoffed loudly. "This is a waste of time," she announced to the gathered warriors. "You're teaching them to be soft, to coddle their feelings. The shadow won't whisper pretty lies, it will come with teeth and rot. We should be sparring, building fortifications, not sitting around holding rocks and crying." A ripple of uncertainty went through the group. Kale hung his head in shame. I felt the discord through the bond, a fraying of threads. I stepped forward before Ronin could respond. "Lyra, would you volunteer, be the one tested?" She raised a defiant chin. "Gladly, show me an enemy I can fight." I nodded to her chosen opponent, a steady veteran named Garrick, not an enemy, a partner, and use the techniques, Garrick, show her their purpose. The exercise began. Lyra, confident and strong, launched into a tirade designed to break morale. "You're weak, Garrick, always have been. I saw you hesitate in the Ridgewood skirmish. Your own pack doubts you. What use are you? When the real fight comes, you'll freeze again, and wolves will die because of you." Garrick, a quiet wolf, closed his eyes. His hand went to the river stone in his pocket, a gift from his mate. He took a deep, slow breath. Lyra's words, sharp and cruel, seemed to slide off him. He didn't engage, didn't argue. He just anchored himself in the memory of his mate's laugh, the smooth certainty of the stone. After a minute, Lyra ran out of venom, frustrated by his lack of reaction. "See, useless, he just hides." "No," Garrick said, opening his eyes. They were clear and calm. "I heard you. The shadow's whispers will sound like that, like our own deepest fears, spoken in a voice we trust. You used my real shame, Lyra, and for a moment it bit." He held up the stone. "But this reminded me that my shame is not the whole of me. My mate's faith is also real. The pack's need is also real. The technique isn't about hiding, it's about choosing what to listen to." Lyra stared, disarmed. She had thrown her best blows, and they had been parried not by strength, but by a deeper, quieter certainty. The watching warriors murmured, the lesson landing more powerfully than any lecture I could have given. "The shadow is a weapon that targets the mind, Lyra," I said, my voice carrying in the quiet. "Ignoring that fact is like ignoring an enemy's archers because you prefer sword fighting. We must prepare for the battlefield as it is, not as we wish it to be." She didn't concede, but the blatant defiance in her eyes dimmed to a simmering conflict. The web held, but the thread connecting to her and her followers remained taut and thin, a potential point of failure. The second strain was external. Our envoys returned from the neighboring packs. The news was grim. The Ridgewood Alpha Tauren had listened with arrogant disbelief. "Nightfall's Alpha lets his Omega Luna fill his head with fairy tales," was the message he sent back. "We have strong walls and stronger warriors. This whispering shadow is likely just a plague of mind-fogging fungi. We will handle it." The Sun Haven pack, led by a pragmatic older alpha named Alara, a coincidence of name that made me smile weakly, was more concerned. They had heard rumors from further north. They agreed to share information, but were hesitant to adopt our unconventional methods. They wanted to see proof they could hold in their hands. Only the scattered, nomadic Western clans who lived closer to spirit lore and old magic understood immediately. Their chieftain, a wizened she-wolf named Maya, sent a cryptic reply with our envoy, "The Grey Hunger remembers the Song of Bonds. Strengthen your chorus, we will listen for the dissonance." We were alone in our full understanding, isolated, the very thing the shadow would want. That night in the strategy room, Kalen pored over maps, frustration etched on his face. Torin is a fool. His pride will get his pack consumed. We can't force them to see, I said, tracing the advancing gray line on the map. It was now a visible blotch, less than half a day's run from our border. We can only make our own stand so undeniable that they have to believe. And if our stand fails, his question was not of doubt but of grim contingency. Then we fall having tried something real, not just repeating the failures of Frostfang. I touched the willow crown, which I now wore even in private councils. It helped me feel the pack's pulse. The web is strong, but we need to test its full strength. The shadow probes with fog and whispers. Soon it will push harder. As if summoned by my words, a sudden, violent tremor shot through the Luna bond, not the cold drip of despair, but a sharp, agonizing rip. I cried out, doubling over. Kalen was beside me in an instant. Ilera. The northern watchpost sentinels pine, I gasped, images and sensations flooding me, not from one wolf but from a cluster of 4. Terror, sharp and immediate, then a sudden, silencing void, not the slow fade of broken will, but an instant, violent severance. 4 threads in my web snapped at once. "Attack," Kalen snarled, already moving. Ronan mobilized the response squad. Now, chaos erupted. Within minutes, a team of our fastest warriors, including a reluctantly included Lyra, was assembled. Kalen insisted on leading. I insisted on going. "You are the Luna, the heart of the web. You cannot risk," he began. "I am the Luna, and my wolves are dying." I cut him off, my voice trembling with fury and pain. "I felt them die. I need to see. I need to understand what we're truly facing. The web isn't just for comfort, Kalen, it's for intelligence, and I am its eyes." He saw the determination in my face, the same clarity that had passed the trial. He gave a terse nod. "Stay behind the line, Ronan with her." We ran through the night, a silent, grim convoy. The forest grew sickly as we neared the border. The air lost its scent of pine and earth, replaced by a stale, metallic odor. The normal sounds of insects and night birds were absent. It was the silence Finn had described, a thick, muffling blanket. Sentinel's Pine was a watchpost built around a massive, ancient tree. As we approached, the first thing we saw was the light, or the lack of it. The permanent witchlight orbs that illuminated the post were dark, not broken, drained. As if the light itself had been consumed, Ronan signaled a halt. Warriors fanned out. Kalen and I, with Ronan as a shadow, moved forward. The post was a scene of surreal horror. No blood, no signs of struggle. The 4 warriors were there, still at their posts. One leaned against the rail of the lookout platform. 2 sat at a small table, cards still in their hands. One lay on his bedroll. They were not dead. Their chests rose and fell slowly, but their eyes were open, staring at nothing, completely vacant, their minds gone, eaten. The gray moss was not on their bodies, but it crawled in thick, pulsating veins up the trunk of the great pine itself, which now stood leafless and twisted, its bark turned the color of ash. Lyra, seeing her comrades, let out a low growl of rage and took a step toward the closest vacant warrior. "Don't touch them." My command was sharp, born of instinct screaming through the bond. Just as she reached out, the nearest vacant warrior, Jax, a young father, twitched. His head turned slowly toward Lyra. His mouth opened, but it wasn't his voice that came out. It was a chorus of distorted, whispering voices speaking as one from his throat. "Strength alone is empty. Your defiance is noise. You are already forgotten." The words carried a psychic punch. Lyra stumbled back as if struck, her face paling, her fierce confidence cracking under the direct assault. The other warriors flinched. I pushed forward, stepping between Lyra and the hollowed-out shell of Jax. The whispering voices focused on me. Little weaver of fragile threads, you spin cobwebs against a storm. We will unravel you from the center. The pressure was immense. It wasn't just sound, it was a cold, invasive presence trying to worm into my mind to find my fears, my doubts. I felt it scrape against the edges of my will. I saw flashes, Kalen's rejecting face, the pack's mocking stares, the snapping of the four bonds. I gripped my willow crown. I didn't just feel my own memories. I felt the web, hundreds of threads, Marlene's gnarled hands weaving, the warmth of the shared fire, Garrick's steady calm, Kalen's pact. The collective, stubborn heartbeat of nightfall. I anchored myself not in my own strength but in theirs. You are the emptiness, I said, my voice clear and steady in the dead air. We are the connection, you consume, we create, you can snap a few threads. I looked at the vacant warriors, my heart breaking, but the web remains and we will mend it. The whispering from Jax's mouth ceased, the vacant eyes just stared, the presence withdrew, but the malevolent intelligence behind it had been made manifest. This was no mindless force. It was cunning, it had lured us here to deliver a message to test our mettle. We cannot help them here, Kalen said, his voice thick with grief and fury. We pull back now. We retrieve the four vacant warriors, carrying them like sleeping children. Their bodies were light, as if part of them had already been taken. As we retreated, I saw the gray moss on the sentinel pine pulse faintly, as if in satisfaction. The journey back was silent, heavy with loss. The shadow had shown its teeth. It didn't just break will, it could devour it whole, leaving hollow puppets, and it could use those puppets to speak. Back at the lodge in the grim dawn light, the council was in emergency session. The vacant warriors were placed in the healing ward under guard. Cora had no answers, their minds were simply absent. It targeted a remote post. Isolated wolves, Ronan analyzed, his face grim. It's learning, testing our response time, our weaknesses. It spoke to me, Lyra said, her voice uncharacteristically small. She wouldn't look at me. It knew what to say. The experience had shaken her worldview to its core. It knows fear, I said, exhausted but clear-headed. It harvests it. This was an escalation, a show of force. It wanted us to feel helpless, to see that even our prepared warriors could be emptied. Kalen slammed a fist on the table. We need to strike back, burn the blighted woods, attack the source, and go where? I asked softly. The source is a feeling, a sickness. You cannot burn a whisper. Attacking blindly into that would just send more wolves into its maw, give it more voices to use against us. So what do we do, Luna? Elder Thorn asked, the title now carrying a weight of genuine, desperate need. I looked at the map, at the advancing blotch. The web in my mind showed the four snapped threads, a raw, painful wound. But around that wound, the other threads were pulling tighter, stronger, in shared grief and determination. We grieve, I said. We honor Jax, Liana, Corbin, and Fel. We add their memories to our stories. We make their loss a thread in our web, a reason to fight harder. I looked at Kalen, and we do not cower. We fortify the web. We extend the buddy system to triplets. We create emergency resonance points, places where the pack bond can be consciously focused and amplified by groups meditating together. We turn our entire territory into a psychic fortress. I turned to Lyra, and we prepare for physical defense too. Because the shadow, once it realizes it cannot break our will easily, may try to break our bodies. We need traps, fallback points, signals. Your skills are vital, Lyra. Not instead of the web, but as its protective shell. She met my gaze, the conflict still there, but now mixed with a grudging respect and the fresh memory of the whispering void. She gave a single, sharp nod. The shadow had drawn first blood, had shown us a horror beyond despair. It had hoped to break us, to splinter our fledgling unity. Instead, it had shown us the true stakes. And in the cold light of that terrible dawn, Nightfall Pack began to weave its web not just of hope, but of unbreakable resolve. The fissure had been tested. And we had begun, painfully, to mend it. The war for our minds had truly begun. the 4 vacant warriors, we called them the Silent Ones, became our grim motivation. They were housed in a separate, sunlit room in the healing ward, their bodies tended to by volunteers who sang to them, told them stories of the pack, held their hands. We refused to treat them as corpses. As long as their hearts beat, we held the hope that a sliver of their spirits might remain, trapped behind the gray veil. The Luna bond where their threads had been now felt like phantom limbs, a constant, aching reminder. The pack's mood solidified from anxious resolve into a deep, solemn determination. The nightly fires now included moments of silence for the Silent Ones. Their names were woven into new heartstrings. Their favorite stories were told. We made their absence a part of our collective strength, a reason to fight for every remaining thread. My idea of resonance points took shape. We identified 5 central locations throughout the territory: the sacred grove, the main fire pit, the healing ward garden, the archives, and the highest watchtower. At designated times, volunteers would gather at these points to meditate, focusing their thoughts on strengthening the pack bond, visualizing the web glowing brighter, pushing back the gray. It was a way to actively channel our collective will, not just passively share it. I led the first session at the sacred grove, sitting in the very chamber where I'd faced the echoes, surrounded by 24 pack members from all ranks. I guided them to feel for the bond, to pour their love for nightfall into it. The effect was immediate. A tangible warmth spread through the grove, and through my connection, I felt the entire web vibrate with a surge of unified purpose. It was like turning up the volume on our shared heart. Even Lyra participated, though she chose the warrior's watchtower point, focusing her formidable will on concepts of protection and vigilance. After, she sought me out. "The resonance, it's real," she admitted, her tone stiff but honest. At the tower, focusing on the perimeter, I could feel the others. The weavers at the fire pit, the elders in the garden, it wasn't fuzzy, it was like aligning shields. "That's exactly what it is," I said. "We are aligning our spirits." She gave a curt nod. "My warriors will maintain the tower point on a rotating schedule." It wasn't an apology, but it was integration. Her thread in the web, once so taut, began to relax and weave more naturally into the whole. This progress made the next blow even more devastating. A moon cycle after the attack on Sentinel's Pine, a ragged convoy stumbled across our southern border. Not an attacking force, but refugees. 30 wolves from the Ridgewood pack, led by a battered, hollow-eyed beta. They collapsed at our border post, begging for sanctuary. Kalen and I met them in the main clearing. The beta, named Draven, could barely stand. "Alpha Tauren, he laughed at your warning," he rasped, his voice shredded. "He said the gray fog was a trick. He led a war party into it to burn it out." Draven's face contorted with remembered horror. The fog, it didn't part, it consumed them, not their bodies, their rage. Their battle cries turned to whimpers, then to silence. They just stopped, stood there, vacant. Then the whispers started using their voices, taunting us, telling us our strength was a joke. He looked at Kalen, then at me, his gaze lingering on my willow crown. The whispers, they said, "The Nightfall Luna understands. She weaves the frail net. Come, let us show you how easily it tears." Then the vacant ones, our own Alpha, they started walking toward our walls, and the gray moss grew over the stones, crumbling them like dust. We ran. We were the ones who doubted you, and you are our only hope. The admission cost him dearly. The Ridgewood refugees, once proud and arrogant, were broken, their spirit shattered. The shadow hadn't just defeated them, it had used their Alpha's own strength and arrogance as the weapon to do it. We took them in. Cora and her healers worked tirelessly, treating not just physical exhaustion but the deep psychic wounds. The pack, to its immense credit, responded with compassion, not gloating. The shared experience of fear transcended old rivalries. Ridgewood's fall was a terrifying confirmation of our fears, but also a validation of our path. That night in the council chamber, the atmosphere was funereal. The maps were updated. The gray blotch now covered the former Ridgewood territory entirely and pressed against our eastern border. We were being flanked. "We must convene the other alphas," Elder Thorne said, his earlier skepticism gone, replaced by urgent pragmatism. "Sun Haven, the western clans, if Ridgewood fell so quickly no single pack can stand. We must present a united front." "They will come now," Ronan said grimly. "Fear is a powerful motivator. We need more than a military alliance," I said, thinking of the resonance points of the web. "We need a spiritual one. We need to try to connect our packs as I am connected to Nightfall, to create a larger web." Kalen looked at me aghast. "The Luna bond is sacred, tied to this land, this bloodline. It cannot be extended to outsiders." "Not the same bond, perhaps," I conceded, "but a similar principle, a pact sworn not just on word but on shared will, a collective resonance." An idea, wild and dangerous, was forming. The sacred grove, the trial of echoes, it doesn't just test individuals, it holds the memory of the pack. What if we could use it, not to administer a trial but to forge a covenant? To let the other alphas and their key leaders feel what we feel, to see the battlefield as it truly is. Silence greeted my words. It sounded like madness. "The grove's magic is ancient and unpredictable," Kalen said slowly. "To invite outsiders into it, it has never been done." "The shadow is an ancient, unpredictable enemy," I countered. "We cannot fight it with only the tools we've always used. The grove showed me mercy, justice, and truth. It can show them, too. It can show them the cost of pride, the strength in connection. Otherwise, they will come here, sit at this table, and argue about troop numbers and supply lines while the real enemy eats their will from the inside." The council debated long into the night. It was a monumental risk. The grove was our most sacred place. Letting others in was a profound vulnerability, but the alternative, trying to convince proud alphas of an intangible threat with words alone, seemed doomed. Finally, Kalen stood. "We do it. We invite Sun Haven's Alpha Alara and Chieftain Maya of the Western clans. We bring them to the grove. We show them the truth. We call it the Council of the Will." Preparations were made in secret and haste. Envoys were dispatched with the unprecedented invitation. Meanwhile, I spent every spare moment in the sacred grove, not taking the trial, but communing with it. I sat before the stone altar, the willow crown on my head, and I poured my intention into the ancient stones. Show them unity, show them the web, help us build a shield for all. The grove remained silent, but the air seemed to grow heavier, waiting. The leaders arrived 3 days later. Alpha Alara of Sun Haven was a tall, regal she-wolf with silver-streaked hair and keen, assessing eyes. Chieftain Maya was small and bent, wrapped in faded hides, her eyes the color of a deep, knowing sky. They brought minimal guards, their curiosity outweighing their caution. The meeting began in the lodge, tense and formal. Alpha Alara was polite but clearly skeptical. Chieftain Maya simply watched, her gaze missing nothing, lingering on my crown and the heartstrings many of our pack now wore visibly. Kalen laid out the facts: the fall of Frostfang, the attack on Sentinel's Pine, the devastating fall of Ridgewood. He spoke of the whispering despair, the vacant wolves, the devouring moss. "Fascinating folklore," Alpha Alara said, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "But my scouts report the blight is slow-moving. Perhaps a containment and burn strategy combined with reinforced borders." "Respect, Alpha," Chiant Maya interrupted, her voice like wind over stones. "Your eyes see leaves but not the rot in the roots. The Nightfall Luna carries the weight of the eaten souls. I can feel it in the air here, grief but not despair, a curious combination." She looked directly at me. "You propose to show us, little weaver." "I do," I said, standing, "not with more words, with experience. We invite you to our sacred grove." Alpha Alara stiffened. "A pack's heart place, this is highly irregular." "The threat is highly irregular," Kalen replied. "We either trust each other with vulnerabilities now or we fall alone later." After a long, tense moment, Alpha Alara nodded, her pride warring with her survival instinct. Maya simply smiled as if she had been waiting for this. We led them to the grove at dusk. Torches were lit within the chamber of echoes, casting long shadows. The stone altar waited. "This is where our lunas are tested," Kaelin explained. "It shows echoes of pivotal truths. We believe it can be guided to show a shared truth." "And what is the shared truth you wish to show?" Alpha Alara asked, her hand resting on her dagger's hilt. "The truth of the shadow," I said, "and the truth of the only defense against it, please. Stand with me at the altar." The three of us, the two alphas, the chieftain, and I formed a circle around the stone. I placed my hands flat upon its cool surface. "Focus on the threat from the north," I whispered. "Not as a story, feel it, the silence, the cold. The hunger, and then feel for the threads around you, the bonds of your own packs." I closed my eyes and reached not just into the grove's magic, but into the pulsing web of the nightfall bond. I drew on the resonance of hundreds of wolves focusing their will at that very moment at our 5 points. I poured that collective energy, that fierce, loving, stubborn defiance, into the altar and threw it to the leaders beside me. The grove responded. There were no personalized visions this time. Instead, a shared sensory experience overwhelmed us. The echo of the shadow, we felt it simultaneously, the crushing, soul-deep loneliness of the gray mist, the seductive whisper promising an end to struggle. The horror of feeling your own memories and loves being slowly drained away, replaced by numb emptiness. We saw, through a fractured collective lens, the fall of Frostfang, the arrogance of Ridgewood, the vacant eyes of our own silent ones. Alpha Alara gasped, a sound of raw terror. Chieftain Maya let out a low, pained moan. Kaelin gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. The echo of the web, then the vision shifted. The crushing pressure was met by a network of golden light, threads of connection, fragile but unbreakable. We felt the warmth of a shared story, the grip of a braided cord, the steadying hand of a buddy on patrol. We felt the resonance points humming like beacons, the collective will of nightfall forming a psychic barrier against the gray. We felt the compassionate inclusion of the Ridgewood refugees, watched as Lyra's thread wove back into the whole. We felt the web not as a barrier, but as a living, breathing entity, the pack itself. The contrast was staggering. The shadow was isolation, consumption, death. The web was connection, creation, life. The vision ended as abruptly as it began. We staggered back from the altar. Alpha Alara was pale, trembling, her regal composure shattered. She looked at her own hands as if seeing them for the first time. It eats the soul," she whispered. Chieftain Maya wiped a tear from her wrinkled cheek. "You have grown a garden of will in the desert of despair, a mighty work weaver." Kaelin steadied himself against the wall, his eyes meeting mine, full of awe at what we had just channeled. "That," I said, my voice hoarse but strong, "is what we are fighting. And that," I pointed to the fading afterimage of the golden web in our minds, "is how we fight it, not with walls alone but with bonds, not in isolation but together." Alpha Alara straightened, a new light in her eyes, not just fear but understanding. "My pack, we have rituals of remembrance, songs of lineage. Could these become resonance points?" "Yes," I said, hope surging, "and your healers can learn ours for treating psychic blight. Your warriors can train in the mental shields." Chieftain Maya nodded. "The Western clans know songs that bend the spirit. We have chants for unity, for strengthening the communal dream. We will teach you." There, in the ancient chamber, a new covenant was born. Not of fealty or military command, but of shared purpose and mutual defense of the spirit. We agreed to establish linked resonance practices, to exchange healers and lore keepers, to create a network of warning using runners and, hopefully, trained messenger birds. We would be separate packs, but a concerted front against the darkness. As we left the grove, the moon high above, Chieftain Maya fell into step beside me. "Your bond with your alpha is strong," she observed quietly, "but it is not the mate bond the moon once sang." "It was severed," I said, the old wound barely a twinge now. I see the scar, she said, but what has grown over it is thicker, truer, a chosen bond of purpose that may be stronger yet. The shadow fears such things most of all. The council of the will had ended. We had bared our sacred heart to outsiders and found not plunderers but allies. The web was no longer just nightfalls. We had taken the first trembling step to weave it across the territories. The shadow had sought to divide and conquer. In response, we had just sown the seeds of a united front, rooted not in fear but in shared truth. The real work, the difficult, messy work of weaving different threads into one strong tapestry, was just beginning. But for the first time since the gray moss appeared on the horizon, I felt not just determination but a fragile, blooming hope. We were no longer just surviving, we were building an answer. The alliance, born in the shared terror and hope of the grove, was fragile as spring ice. Alpha Alara returned to Sun Haven with a new urgency, but her pack was vast and tradition-bound. Implementing resonance circles and mental shield drills among warriors who valued stoic silence above all else was a slow, grinding process. Reports from our liaisons spoke of skepticism, of elders calling it nightfall mysticism. The Western clans under Maya integrated the concepts more seamlessly. Their spirit songs were adapted, becoming ward chants hummed at border camps. They were natural weavers of will, but their forces were scattered, nomadic. Coordinating a unified defense with them was like trying to herd moonbeams. In Nightfall, we refined our systems. The buddy system evolved into quads, 4 wolves per unit, each with a designated role. Anchor held the memory focus, Sentinel watched for physical signs of despair in others, Voice maintained verbal contact with other units, and Shield a warrior like Lyra, trained to respond to any physical manifestation. Our entire northern border became a latticework of these quads, connected by relay runners and, increasingly, by the thrumming intention of the resonance points. The silent ones remained unchanged in their sunlit room, but something shifted in the pack's relationship with them. They were no longer just a tragedy, they became our charge, our reason. We refused to let the shadow claim them completely. Every day, volunteers spent hours with them, reading, playing soft music, simply holding their hands. It was an act of defiance. You cannot have them, we whispered back to the gray woods. We remember them, we hold them still. The constant, low-grade drain of maintaining such vigilance was immense. I felt it through the bond, a steady undercurrent of fatigue beneath the determination. My own sleep was filled with fragmented dreams of snapping threads and whispering voids. I would wake with the taste of gray moss in my mouth, my hand gripping the willow crown on my bedside table. Kalen bore the weight in a different way. He drilled the warriors relentlessly on physical contingencies, his frustration with the slow-moving alliance manifesting as a sharp, cutting intensity. Our partnership, the chosen bond Maya had noted, was tested daily. We snapped at each other over resource allocation, over the pace of training, over how to handle Lyra's lingering friction with some of the more spiritually focused quads. One evening, after a particularly heated argument about whether to allocate more timber to reinforce the eastern palisade or to build a new, larger resonance hall, he slammed his hand on the strategy table. We are trying to build a castle out of cobwebs and song while the enemy forges battering rams, he growled, and you would build a castle of stone that the enemy will simply walk through because its defenders have lost the will to stand on the walls. I shot back, we glared at each other across the map, the tension a living thing, then the absurdity of it hit us, 2 leaders fighting about how best to fight. A weary laugh escaped me. Kalen's scowl softened into a rueful grimace. We're tired, I said, stating the obvious. Exhausted, he agreed, sinking into a chair. He rubbed his face. The scouts report no movement for 5 days. The gray line is stable. It's unsettling, like it's watching, learning. The calm before, I murmured, a chill skating down my spine. I moved to the window, looking north. The days were growing shorter, the nights colder. An early frost had silvered the grass. It's consolidating, or it's preparing a different kind of strike. We lapsed into a companionable silence, the earlier anger spent. This was our rhythm now: clash, exhaust, find common ground in our shared burden. It was not love, but it was a profound and weary solidarity. I visited the silent ones today, I said quietly. With Marlene, she was telling Jax about his daughter's first hunt. I thought I saw his finger twitch. Kalen looked up, a fragile hope in his eyes. A reflex, perhaps, but we will keep talking to them. The shadow consumes will. Maybe a strong enough will, reaching them from the outside, can plant a seed, a memory to cling to. He came to stand beside me at the window. You never give up on anyone, do you? I learned it from the pack, I said. You didn't give up on me, not entirely. You dragged me into the trial. I was desperate. Sometimes, I said, meeting his gaze, desperation and faith look very similar. He held my look for a long moment, the ghost of the mate bond a faint, mournful echo between us before he turned back to the map. We need to use this calm, not just to build but to strike a blow of our own, a symbolic one. My brow furrowed. What do you mean? The sentinel pine, the post is lost, corrupted, but the land around it, it was ours. It's where the shadow first truly touched us. What if we didn't just defend? What if we tried to reclaim it? Not with warriors, but with will, a concentrated resonance right at the edge of the blight, to show the shadow and our own pack that we are not just waiting. The idea was audacious, dangerous, a direct psychic confrontation. We could lose people, their minds could be overwhelmed. We take the strongest, volunteers only. We anchor it from here, from the sacred grove itself, with you as the focus. We don't send our spirits in, we project our resolve out, a beacon, a declaration. My heart pounded. It was the next logical step, and it terrified me. But the fatigue in the bond needed a victory, however small. The alliance needed proof that our methods were not just defensive. We plan it for the next full moon, when the pack's connection to the land is strongest. The reclamation project became our secret focus. We selected 20 volunteers, the most disciplined from the resonance circles, including Lyra and Garrick. For 2 weeks, we trained not in meditation, but in targeted projection. We practiced focusing our collective intention on a single, small point, a candle flame, then a specific tree outside the territory, imagining it cleansed, protected, ours. The bond during these sessions was incredible. 20 individual wills harmonizing into a single, potent beam of focused intent. It felt like forging a new kind of weapon. The night of the full moon arrived, cold and crystal clear. The pack knew something was happening. A special, all-pack resonance was called at the sacred grove. Hundreds gathered, their curiosity and anxiety a buzzing energy in the bond. Kalen and I stood before the stone altar. The 20 volunteers formed an inner circle around us. The rest of the pack spread out through the grove and the surrounding forest, a vast living battery. We focus on the sentinel pine, I instructed, my voice amplified by the grove's natural acoustics. Not on the corruption, on the memory of the tree, its strength, its years of watchfulness. We push our remembrance, our loyalty to that piece of our home against the shadow's claim. See it in your mind, whole and green. Feel the pack that stands here with you. We are one will. I placed my hands on the altar, the willow crown warm on my brow. Kalen placed his hands over mine. The volunteers linked hands. The entire pack, through the cascading bond, focused. We began. It started as a hum, a vibration in the earth. Then the air in the grove began to glow with a soft gold-silver light, the combined will of the nightfall pack, focused and channeled through the grove's ancient magic. I felt it as a roaring river of purpose flowing through me, from the hundreds of threads behind me, directed by the 20 and spearheaded by my own intent. In my mind's eye, I saw the blighted pine, shrouded in gray, the moss pulsing. I poured the river of light at it. For a moment, nothing. Then the gray moss recoiled. It shrank back from the base of the tree, withering to dry ash. A patch of clean, dark bark was revealed, a single, fresh green needle sprouted from a brittle branch. A shockwave of elation reverberated through the bond. We had done it, we had pushed it back, but our triumph was met with an immediate, vicious response. The vision in my mind didn't vanish. Instead, the gray blotch concentrated. It didn't fight our light directly, it diverted. A tendril of profound, cunning malice shot down the beam of our projection, not at its source in the grove, but along the connecting threads. It targeted the weakest point in the chain. In the inner circle, a young Omega named Felan, who had volunteered out of fervent loyalty but whose personal grief over a recently lost parent made his spirit raw, gasped. The focused backlash of despair didn't attack the pack, it isolated him. It amplified his personal, private sorrow, twisting it into a tsunami of hopelessness that drowned out the pack's support. His thread in the bond, bright a moment before, went dark and brittle. His eyes, squeezed shut in concentration, flew open. They were not vacant, but filled with a bottomless, personal agony the shadow had weaponized. He screamed, a sound of pure, shattered despair, and broke the circle, stumbling back. The collective focus shattered, the river of light snapped, the connection wavered. In that moment of fractured unity, the shadow struck its real blow, not at Felan, not at the grove. Back at the sentinel pine, the patch of clean bark blackened instantly, the green needle shriveled. And from the trunk, the whispering chorus erupted, not from a vacant wolf, but from the tree itself, its voice the creaking groan of wood and the hiss of dead moss. The words slammed into our fragmented bond, aimed with cruel precision. You see, your unity is a lie. It breaks on the rocks of personal pain. You cannot heal every hurt, you cannot save every thread. He is broken because you are not enough. You will always not be enough. The words were aimed at me. They echoed the deepest fear I had confessed in the trial, the fear of being fundamentally inadequate, and they used Felan's very real, very public breakdown as proof. The psychic assault was devastating. The pack's elation curdled into confusion, doubt, and a surge of pity and fear for Felan, who was now sobbing in Lyra's arms. The bond, a moment ago a brilliant weapon, now thrummed with discordance and shock. The gray moss reasserted itself over the pine, seeming denser, more malevolent than before. We hadn't just failed, we had given the shadow a blueprint of our defense and shown it our weakness. The grove gathering dissolved into chaos and concern. Healers rushed to Felan. The pack murmured, their confidence shaken. The reclamation had been a disaster. In the aftermath, in the hollow silence of the strategy room, Kaelin looked defeated. It learned, it didn't attack our strength, it found the crack in our armor and poured poison through it. I felt numb. The shadow's words rang in my head, you are not enough. Felan's broken face was the evidence. I had led them into that, my idea. It was my fault, I whispered. No, Kaelin said, sharp. It was a risk, we took it. The shadow is intelligent, it adapts. Now we know, unity cannot mean pretending individual pain doesn't exist. We have to be stronger than that. Our web has to hold even when a single thread is strained to breaking. How? The word was a plea. We do what we've always done, we mend. He stood, his weariness replaced by a renewed, gritty resolve. We care for Felan, we acknowledge his pain, make it part of our story too. We show the pack that a broken thread doesn't destroy the web, it becomes a place where we weave extra support, and we learn. Our next move must account for this. The shadow exploits isolation even within the group, so we eliminate isolation completely. The following days were hard. Felan's breakdown was a public wound. The shadow's taunt, you are not enough, echoed in many hearts, including, I feared, my own. But then the pack surprised me. Marlene organized a rotation to sit with Felan, not to lecture or heal him with force, but to simply share their own stories of loss, of breaking, of being mended. Warriors, including Lyra, visited not as tough superiors, but as comrades who had also felt fear. They didn't tell him to be strong, they told him it was okay to not be for a while. And slowly, Felon's thread in the bond, though still delicate, began to glow again, not with its former naive brightness, but with a softer, more complex light, the light of a hurt acknowledged and shared. The web held, it had strained, but it had not broken. In fact, around Felon's thread I could see new, thicker strands being woven by the pack's compassion. The shadow had sought to prove our connection was fragile. In response, we demonstrated its resilience. The failure at the Sentinel Pine didn't destroy us, it deepened our understanding. We had learned a brutal lesson. The battlefield was not just at the border, but within every heart, and our defense had to be as intimate, as personal as the attack. The calm was over. The shadow had shown its next strategy, targeted psychological siege against individual vulnerabilities. And nightfall, bruised but wiser, began to prepare for a war not of grand gestures, but of countless, small, steadfast acts of kindness and unwavering presence. The war for our minds had just gotten personal. The failure at the Sentinel Pine cast a long shadow, but not the one the enemy intended. Instead of despair, it bred a grim, clear-eyed determination. We had looked into the abyss and seen its strategy. Now we had to adapt ours. Felon's recovery became a quiet triumph. He didn't return to frontline resonance work, but he began helping Marlene organize the heartstring braiding, his hands steady as he taught others. His pain, once weaponized against us, was now integrated into our strength, a reminder of the cost and the cure. Our training evolved. We introduced vulnerability drills. In safe, small groups, wolves practiced sharing a personal fear or pain while the others practiced holding space, offering support without trying to fix it. It was raw, emotional work that left many exhausted, but it strengthened the bonds between squad mates immeasurably. The web grew more nuanced, capable of bearing weight at specific points without threatening the whole. Lyra, to everyone's surprise, excelled at this. Her blunt honesty turned out to be an asset. She didn't offer platitudes, but a fierce, "I see you're hurt. Now let's make sure nothing else gets to you." Her warriors became some of the most tightly knit quads. Weeks passed. The gray line remained stable, a silent, brooding presence. The reports from our allies were mixed. Sunhaven was making slow progress, their resonant circles often stiff and formal but holding. The Western clans reported gray-tinged dreams among their scouts but used their spirit songs to cleanse them. The alliance was a patchwork holding but barely. Then the first snow fell. It dusted the corrupted woods with an eerie gray and white speckle, making the blight even more visible. And with the snow came a new, chilling development. It started with dreams, not just for scouts but for anyone near the border. Vivid, haunting dreams of loved ones, lost parents, fallen friends, mates calling from within the gray woods. Their voices were perfect, pleading lonely. "Come find me, I'm cold, I'm lost, just come to the edge." Several Omegas living in outlying cabins had to be moved after sleepwalking toward the border, found shivering in their nightclothes, mumbling about their mother's voice. No one was physically harmed, but the psychological violation was profound. The shadow was no longer just whispering general despair. It was crafting personalized lures, using our greatest loves as bait. We doubled the patrols and instituted mandatory dream checks for anyone living near the perimeter. Healers brewed teas to encourage dreamless sleep, but the unease grew. The enemy was in our heads now, in our most private sanctuaries. The breaking point came on the winter solstice, the longest night. A massive bank of unnatural fog rolled out from the blight, not the creeping mist of before, but a wall of thick, sound-absorbing gray that swallowed the moonlight. It didn't cross our border. It stopped right at the line, forming a towering, silent cliff face of fog that stretched as far as the eye could see. And then from the fog they emerged, figures, dozens of them, walking slowly, stiffly, to the very edge of our territory. They stopped, standing in a silent, ragged line. They were the vacant ones, warriors from Frostfang, from Ridgewood, and our own 4 from Sentinel's Pine. Jack stood there, blank eyes aimed at our watchfires. Among them we saw Alpha Tauren of Ridgewood, his proud face now slack and empty. The Hollow Legion, they didn't speak, didn't move, they just stood there, a wall of stolen souls, a grotesque parody of a picket line. The message was clear: this is what awaits you. This is your future, your strength, your pride, your love. We will take it and leave this. The effect on the sentries was instantaneous and catastrophic. Seeing their former comrades, their rivals, their own packmates reduced to husks, it was a visual assault more powerful than any whisper. Several warriors on the wall broke down, sobbing or raging. The despair was a physical wave crashing against our borders. Kaelin, Ronan, Lyra, and I rushed to the northern wall. The sight stole the breath from my lungs. The Hollow Legion stood so still, the gray fog swirling behind them like a dreadful curtain. Archers. Lyra snarled, her voice cracking with grief and fury. Light the pitch, burn them, give them peace. No, my command tore from me. I could feel it through the bond. The second we attacked those empty shells, the shadow would use it. It would twist our act of mercy or rage into proof of our barbarity, our hopelessness. They are traps, their bodies are prisons. If we destroy them, we play into its narrative. We become destroyers of the already lost. Then what do we do, Luna? A young sentry wept, pointing at Jax. We just look at him. I climbed onto the parapet, facing the Legion, my back to my pack. The willow crown felt like the only solid thing in the world. I reached into the bond, not to draw strength, but to give it. I pushed past the horror, past the grief, and focused on the memory of the individuals those shells had once been. I began to speak, my voice carrying on the frozen air, amplified by the Luna bond so every wolf on the wall and hopefully deep into the pack could hear. I see Jax, I called out, not to the Legion but to my pack. Who taught his daughter to track rabbits, who laughed too loud at Ronan's bad jokes. I moved my gaze. I see Lyanna, who could sing every verse of the long winter ballad. I see Alpha Tauren, who once won a wrestling match against 3 Ridgewood warriors to save a trapped pup from a landslide. I named them. I recounted not their deeds of strength, but their moments of humanity, of connection. I painted them not as heroes or victims, but as people who had loved and been loved. The shadow shows you their empty shells and says, "This is all that remains." It is a liar. My voice grew stronger, fueled by the bond as the pack, listening, began to add their own memories, their own love to the stream. What remains is here. I pressed a fist to my heart. In our memories, in the stories we tell. In Jax's daughter, who has his smile. In the pup Tauren saved, who is now a warrior on this wall. The shadow can take the vessel, but it can never take what they meant to us. That is ours. And we will not let their memory be used as a weapon against their home. As I spoke, I directed the collective will of the pack, not as a spear of light, but as a blanket of remembrance, of pure, defiant love toward the Hollow Legion. We did not attack the corruption, we honored what it had tried to erase. A strange thing happened. The vacant faces didn't change, but the oppressive, despair-inducing aura around them, it wavered. It was as if our focused remembrance created a barrier the shadow's narrative couldn't penetrate. Then, from within the ranks of the Hollow Legion, one figure moved, not aggressively. Alpha Tauren's shell took a single, stumbling step forward. His mouth opened. The whispering chorus started to emerge, but it was fractured, conflicted. Beneath the shadow's voice, for just a second, there was a ragged, distant echo of Tauren's own roar, the one he'd used to save that pup. Silence, weak memory, is puppy safe, the voices warred within the hollow vessel. Then Tauren's body shuddered violently and went still again. The shadow reasserted control, but the crack had been shown. The gray fog behind the Legion swirled angrily. The hollow shells turned in unison and marched back into the mist, which then began to recede, dissolving into the night, leaving only trampled snow and a profound, ringing silence. We had not won a battle, but we had held the line against a masterful psychological attack. We had refused to play by the shadow's rules. We had fought with memory, and for a moment we had made the enemy's puppet falter. The pack on the wall was not cheering. They were weeping, holding each other, but their tears were not of despair. They were of catharsis, of painful, proud remembrance. Lyra looked at me, her face streaked with tears she didn't bother to hide. "You named him Jax. You made him a person again, not a ghost." Her voice was thick. That was better than an arrow. Kalen put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. "You turned their weapon back on them. You used our connection not as a shield, but as a mirror, showing them what they could never truly take." Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow, but beneath it was a fierce, quiet joy. The shadow had thrown its worst horror at us, the desecration of our loved ones, and we had responded not with violence but with a love so loud it disrupted the enemy's signal. That night, around every fire in Nightfall, the stories were told. Stories of Jax, of Lyanna, of Corbin, of Fell, of the fallen of Frostfang and Ridgewood. We didn't just remember their deaths, we celebrated their lives. The Hollow Legion's appearance, intended to break us, had instead sparked a massive, collective act of remembrance that strengthened the web beyond anything we could have planned. The shadow had learned we could resist whispers and fog. It had learned we could withstand targeted personal assaults. Now it knew we could even face the horror of our hollowed-out loved ones without shattering. It would have to try something else. And as the long winter night wore on, I felt a new, different tension through the bond, not fear, but a watchful, steely anticipation. We had faced the Legion of the Lost, and we had remembered them home. The next move was the Shadow S. But for the first time I was certain, whatever it was, Nightfall Pack would meet it not with a roar, but with a story. And we had so many more stories left to tell. Winter tightened its grip, but the strange, watchful stillness held. The gray line did not advance. The Hollow Legion did not reappear. The blight sat like a festering wound under the snow, silent and brooding. It was a different kind of siege, a siege of anticipation. The pack's nerves, once frayed by constant assault, now wore thin with the tension of waiting. Through the Luna bond I felt the strain, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, like a bowstring drawn too tight for too long. The Alliance felt the strain, too. Alpha Alara sent terse messages, Sunhaven's resonant circles were producing results, but morale was brittle. The Western clans reported disturbing new gray songs on the wind, melodies that subtly twisted their protective chants into dirges. The shadow wasn't attacking, it was eroding. Our own peace was shattered not by an external attack, but from a place we had believed secure, the healing ward. Finn, the Frostfang survivor, had been slowly recovering. He'd grown stronger, helping in the gardens, his laughter a rare, precious sound. But one morning he didn't arrive for his duties. He was found in his room, sitting on his bed, staring at the wall, not vacant like the silent ones. He was present, but a terrible, frozen clarity shone in his eyes. "It's inside the wards," he whispered when Cora tried to rouse him. "Not the moss, the idea. It doesn't need to cross the border. We brought it in with us." He pointed a trembling finger at his own temple. "I carried it, a seed of doubt. It's been growing. Listening, it knows our defenses now. It knows the web from the inside." Panic, sharp and cold, lanced through the bond. If the shadow could infect not just land but minds, and use those minds as spies, our sanctuary was compromised. We isolated Finn, placing him under gentle guard and the care of our most skilled psychic healers. But the damage was done. The whisper spread through the pack like a virus. Is my doubt my own, or is it the enemy? Can I trust my own thoughts? The unity we had forged, the trust that was the bedrock of the web, began to fissure. Wolves eyed each other with suspicion. Was a friend's sadness natural grief or a vector for the blight? Was a warrior's strategic caution born of experience or of whispered subversion? The Shadow's new strategy was diabolical. It had made us doubt our very selves. The council meeting that followed was the most fractured yet. Elder Thorne argued for quarantining all refugees, even those who had been with us for months. Lyra, her hard-won trust evaporating, demanded Finn be exiled for the safety of all. Ronan, ever practical, suggested a loyalty test of some kind, though he had no idea what that would entail. Kalen listened, his face a mask of stone, but I felt his turmoil through our bond, a whirlwind of protective fury and helpless frustration. Silence, my voice though quiet, cut through the noise. I was so tired of the fear, the suspicion, the shadow's endless, clever cruelty. We are doing exactly what it wants. It wants us to turn on each other, to see enemies within. Finn is not the enemy, he is its latest victim. He is a threat, Lyra insisted. So is despair, I shot back. So is isolation. So is losing faith in the wolf beside you. Exile him, and you tell every wolf here who struggles with doubt that they will be cast out too. You will destroy the web from the inside faster than the shadow ever could. I stood, the willow crown feeling like a yoke. The shadow attacks our connections. Our answer must be to strengthen them blindly and relentlessly. We will not quarantine, we will embrace. We will double our vigilance, not against each other, but for each other. We will watch for the signs not with suspicion, but with compassion. If the shadow is among us, then our only defense is to make the connections between us so bright, so true, that its whispers cannot find a dark corner to grow in. It was a gamble. A terrifying one. It required a level of trust that felt superhuman. I went to Finn's isolation room. He looked up, his eyes haunted. "Luna, I'm sorry, I tried to fight it." "I know," I said, sitting beside him, "and you are still fighting by telling us." That took courage. I didn't touch him, but I opened myself through the Luna bond, not probing but offering. I let him feel the pack's worry, yes, but also its underlying, stubborn love, its determination to protect all its members. "It's so hard," he whispered. The voice, it sounds like my own. It says, "They'll never truly trust you. You're a burden, a danger." "Then listen to my voice instead," I said, firm and clear. "You are Finn of Frostfang, survivor. You are welcome in Nightfall. You are part of the web. Your struggle is our struggle. We fight it together or we fail apart." We instituted a new practice, truth circles, small voluntary groups where wolves could speak their darkest fears and doubts aloud without judgment, to be met with support and shared strength. It was a deliberate act of exposure, of shining light into the hidden places where the shadow's seeds might take root. It was painful, vulnerable work, but slowly the climate of suspicion began to thaw. Wolves realized they were not alone in their secret fears. Then the shadow made its move. It didn't come from the north, it came from the east, from the direction of the now-dead Ridgewood territory. Not as an army, but as a single, desperate runner. A Sunhaven scout, her uniform torn, her eyes wild, stumbled into our eastern patrol. She carried a message from Alpha Allura, but it was the state of the messenger herself that was the true message. She was babbling, caught in a waking nightmare. The songs, the clan's songs, they turned wrong in our heads. We started hearing them everywhere in the wind. In the river, telling us to lay down our weapons to sleep. Half the eastern garrison just walked into the woods singing, "Alpha Allura, she's holding the fort, but she requests, she begs for the Luna who understands the whispers. She says the shadow has learned to sing." The scout collapsed. As our healers saw to her, the meaning crashed over us. The shadow had bypassed our strengthened northern defenses entirely. It had swung east, targeting the weaker link in the alliance, Sunhaven, whose integration of our methods was still formal, still brittle. And it had used the Western clans' own spiritual tools against them, perverting their unity songs into weapons of mass surrender. The strategic implications were horrifying. The shadow was intelligent, adaptable, and now mobile. It could identify and exploit weaknesses in the larger, patchwork web of our alliance. Kalen immediately began mobilizing warriors for an eastern relief force, but I stopped him. "A military force will be too slow, and it plays to the shadow's new strength," I said, my mind racing. "It's using sound, psychic resonance turned toxic. We need to counter with a stronger, purer resonance. We need to go there, not an army, a choir." He stared at me. You cannot go to a battlefield. It's not a battlefield of claws, Kaelin. It's a battlefield of song. They need a conductor. They need someone who can feel the discord and recalibrate the melody. They need the Luna bond. I touched the willow crown. I can connect to Sun Haven's people if their alpha allows it. I can help them find their harmony again before they all walk into the woods. It was the most dangerous thing I had ever proposed. To leave the heart of my web to go into a territory under active psychic assault. Kaelin's face was a war of duty and fear. If you go and the shadow attacks here, the web will be without its center. The web's center isn't me, I said, meaning it. It's the connection between every wolf. You are its anchor as much as I am. You must hold it, trust the pack, trust the bonds we've woven, and trust me. He closed his eyes, a muscle ticking in his jaw. When he opened them, the decision was made. Ronan goes with you. Lyra leads your guard, a small, fast group. You get in, do what you can, and get out, no heroics. His hand found mine, a brief, fierce squeeze. Come back to your web, Luna. The journey east was a blur of speed and dread. The small group, Ronan, Lyra, two of her steadiest warriors, and myself, moved like ghosts. As we crossed into Sun Haven territory, the change was palpable. The air felt thick, lethargic. The normal sounds of the forest were overlaid with a faint, discordant hum that set my teeth on edge. It was a corrupted version of the Western clan's ward chants. We found Alpha Alara at what remained of her eastern garrison, a stone fort now half empty. She looked decades older, her regal composure stripped away, replaced by the haggard face of a commander losing a war she couldn't see. Ilara, she greeted me, using my name, not my title, a sign of her desperation. It's in the music, in the very sound of the water. My wolves, they just lose the will. They hear a song only they can hear, and they follow it. We need to give them a different song to listen to, I said. A real one. Gather everyone who can still fight it in the central courtyard. Now, as the remaining garrison, perhaps 50 wolves, their eyes shadowed with fear and fatigue, gathered, I felt the discord physically. It was like standing in a room where everyone was humming a different, slightly off-key note. The shadow's corruption wasn't a single voice, it was the disruption of harmony itself. I climbed onto a low wall. I had no instruments, no choir. Only my voice and the bond I hoped to forge. People of Sun Haven, I called out. The shadow is feeding you a lie in a pretty melody. It is telling you your fight is over. I am here to tell you it has only just begun. I closed my eyes, reaching out not with the Luna bond of nightfall, but with something more fundamental, the simple, ancient power of shared intention. Listen to my voice, not the words, the feeling behind them. I began to hum. A simple, steady note, the first note of the oldest pack lullaby I knew, a song about the first sunrise. I poured into it every feeling of warmth, of safety, of dawn after a long night that I could muster. I poured in my memory of nightfall's fires, of Marlene's hands, of Kaelin's pact. For a moment, nothing. Then Alpha Alara, her voice rough but clear, began to hum with me, finding the harmony. Then Ronan added a lower note, solid as earth. One by one, the Sun Haven wolves joined, a young healer, a grizzled sentry. Their individual, shaken notes began to coalesce to find their place in a chord. We weren't singing a spell, we were remembering how to be in tune with each other. The discordant hum in the air wavered. It fought back, pushing dissonant thoughts into my mind, images of failure, of the silent ones of Kaelin falling. But the chord we were building together was stronger. It was real. It was alive. I opened my eyes and saw the change. The vacant hopelessness was receding from their faces, replaced by focus, by a shared effort. The psychic miasma was clearing, but the shadow thwarted, changed tactics one last time. It abandoned subtlety. From the tree line beyond the fort, figures emerged. Not the Hollow Legion, but Sun Haven's own lost garrison wolves, dozens of them. Their eyes were not vacant, but full of a terrible, zealous light. They moved with a single, predatory purpose. And they were singing, a twisted, beautiful, heartbreaking rendition of the very ward chant we were using to heal. They had been turned into a perverse choir, their connection weaponized against us. They marched toward the open gates, their song a physical force that began to unravel the harmony we had just built. Our wolves faltered, horrified by the sight of their friends and family as enemy instruments. The shadow's final, brutal lesson, the deepest connection when corrupted becomes the most devastating weapon. The fractured mirror of our alliance now showed our own faces, twisted and used against us. The battle for Sun Haven and for all our souls had just entered its most horrific phase. The corrupted wolves advanced, their twisted song ablaze against the fragile harmony we'd built. It wasn't just noise, it was a psychic attack woven into melody, each note carrying the essence of the shadow's despair, amplified by the love and camaraderie that had once bound these wolves together. Our own singers faltered, their voices catching in their throats as they recognized the faces in the front row, a brother, a mate, a mentor. "Hold the line," Alpha Alara roared, but her command was shredded by the dissonant choir. Panic, raw and immediate, threatened to swamp the courtyard. Lyra and her warriors drew their weapons, but their hands shook. To fight was to cut down their own. Ronan positioned himself in front of me, a solid wall of dread. This was the shadow's masterpiece. Not just to break our will, but to force us to break our own hearts. I closed my eyes, blocking out the terrifying sight. I couldn't fight this with a sword or a shield. I had to fight it on its own terms, connection versus connection. Their bond was corrupted, turned into a weapon. Ours had to be purer, stronger, truer. I reached deep past my own terror, past the Luna bond that connected me to nightfall, to the very first lesson of the Grove, truth. I stopped humming the lullaby. I opened my mouth and I spoke, my voice cutting through the twisted song, not with volume but with utter, vulnerable honesty. I didn't use the Luna bond's power, I used its intimacy, letting my words carry directly into the hearts of the defenders around me, and I hoped, through the corruption, to the lost ones. "I see you, Kaelin." I called out, naming a young Sun Haven warrior I'd been told was among the lost. "You who taught your little sister to track the dawn sparrow, she misses your stories." The corrupted Kaelin in the front line didn't flinch, but his zealous singing hit a momentary, fractional hitch. I kept going, pulling from the fragments of knowledge I'd gleaned in my short time here. "Myra, you saved your patrol from a landslide with your quick thinking. They are here, they remember." I pointed to a healer behind me whose face was a mask of agony. One by one, I named them. I recited not their titles, but their small, human deeds of kindness, courage, and love. I painted pictures of them as they were, not as the hollow instruments they had become. It was a desperate, personal countermelody to the shadow's dirge. Alpha Alara, understanding, joined me. "Bran, you who shared your rations with a starving rogue," her voice broke, "your compassion is not forgotten." Then Ronan, his voice a gravelly bass, "Alara's guard, you held the broken bridge for an hour so the young could cross. That strength is yours, not its." One by one, the Sun Haven defenders found their voices again, not to sing but to bear witness, to testify. They called out the true names, the true stories of the advancing wolves. It became a chorus of remembrance, a wall of love built from 1,000 small truths. The effect on the corrupted choir was not immediate surrender, it was chaos. The beautiful, unified, terrible song began to fracture. Some of the corrupted wolves stopped singing, their mouths moving soundlessly. Others sang louder, desperately, the shadow fighting to maintain control. A few stumbled, clutching their heads as if torn apart from within. The advancing line slowed, then stopped, 20 paces from the gate. They stood, a seething mass of conflicting impulses, the shadow's compulsive melody versus the pull of their own remembered souls. Then, from the center of their ranks, a figure pushed forward. It was the Sun Haven Beta who had walked into the woods. His eyes blazed with the corrupted light, but his face was contorted in a silent scream of effort. His mouth opened, and two voices fought to emerge, the shadow's crystalline, despairing note and his own ragged, real voice. The song is a lie, remember the bridge, hold the line. With a final, titanic effort, he turned and slammed his fist into the face of the corrupted wolf beside him. Not to kill, but to disrupt, to break the pattern, it was the catalyst. The corrupted choir shattered, some wolves collapsed, sobbing, others fought each other in confused, desperate rage. Many just stood, trembling, the zealous light dying in their eyes, replaced by dawning horror and confusion. The shadow's hold was broken, not by force but by a flood of specific, personal, undeniable truth. It could corrupt a feeling, but it could not erase the facts of a life lived. Now, healers, Alpha Alara screamed and the gates swung open. But it wasn't warriors who rushed out first, it was the healers and the families. They ran not with weapons, but with blankets, water, and open arms. They embraced the weeping, confused returnees, pulling them back into the fort, surrounding them with the very connections the shadow had tried to poison. We had won, not by destroying the corrupted, but by remembering them back to themselves. The cleanup took days. The returned wolves were weak, mentally scarred, and filled with a guilt that needed gentle untangling. But they were back. The shadow had overreached. In trying to use our deepest bonds as a weapon, it had shown us their ultimate, unbreakable strength. As I prepared to return to nightfall, Alpha Alara took my hands. Her eyes, once skeptical, now held the same weary, unshakable certainty I saw in my own mirror. You taught us more than a defense, Luna Alara. You taught us an offense. The truth is our sword. Memory is our shield. We will not forget this lesson. The return to nightfall was a somber triumph. The story of Sun Haven's reclamation by remembrance spread through the pack and the alliance like a cleansing fire. The Western clans refined their songs into truth whispers, short, potent phrases of personal history used to disrupt psychic attacks. The Shadow's strategy of internal corruption was met everywhere with a unified response, relentless, specific, compassionate truth-telling, but the gray blotch on our border remained. It had been repelled, outmaneuvered, and revealed, yet it persisted. It was a root of poison in the land itself. Winter began its slow retreat, and with the first thaw, a new clarity came. The shadow was not an army to be defeated, it was a sickness to be healed. And we were only treating the symptoms. We have to go to the source, I said to Kalen in the sacred grove. The willow crown in my hands felt heavier than ever, not to fight, to understand, to cleanse. He stared at me, the heart of the blight. That is suicide. No one who has gone in has come back sane if they come back at all. No one has gone in with what we have, I said, the fully realized web, a Luna bond at its peak, an Alpha's will, the linked resonance of 3 territories. We don't go to conquer, we go to witness, to show the land that it is not alone, that it is still remembered. It was the ultimate extension of our strategy. If the shadow fed on isolation and forgottenness, then the cure was connection and remembrance, applied directly to the wound. The plan, dubbed the mending, took a moon cycle to prepare. We selected a group of 7, Kalen and myself, Ronan and Lyra for steadfastness, a Sun Haven truth speaker, a Western clan spirit singer, and to everyone's surprise, Finn. His recovery was our greatest testament, and his first-hand experience with the shadow's inner workings was invaluable. On the morning of the spring equinox, a day of balance, we stood at the very edge of the blight. The gray, twisted trees loomed, silent. The air was dead. Behind us, at the 5 resonance points and at linked points in Sun Haven and the Western clans, hundreds of wolves focused their will, their love, their memories of healthy forests and sun-dappled clearings into the web. I was their conduit. We stepped into the blight. The silence was absolute, a physical pressure on the ears. The gray moss underfoot felt like walking on dust and bones. The twisted trees seemed to lean in, watching. The shadow's presence was everywhere, a cold, ancient hunger. It tested us immediately. Whispers not in our ears but in our memories. It showed us our worst failures, our deepest shames. It showed Kaelin my face on the night of the rejection, twisted with hate. It showed me the silent ones blaming me with empty eyes, but we were prepared. The Sun Haven truth speaker recited our true deeds. The spirit singer hummed a note of pure presence. Lyra growled a single word, lies. Ronan simply stood an immovable rock. Finn breathed deeply and said, I know you, you have no new tricks. And Kaelin and I, our chosen bond, a tangible force between us, held the center. We did not argue with the whispers. We acknowledged the pain they showed us, and then we overlaid it with the truth of what came after, the partnership, the growth. The pack that had risen from the ashes, we walked deeper. The blight grew more intense. The trees were no longer just twisted, they were frozen in agonized shapes. We saw the remnants of Frostfang and Ridgewood, not bones, but impressions of despair fossilized in the gray moss. And then we found the heart. It wasn't a fortress or a monster, it was a clearing. In its center stood the oldest, largest oak I had ever seen, but it was utterly dead, a colossal skeleton of gray wood. At its base was a pool of still, black water that reflected no light. This was the wellspring of the silence, the source of the whispering void. It was a place of such profound, forgotten loneliness that it made the soul ache. The shadow's final defense rose from the pool. Not an army, but a single figure. It was a mirror image of me, woven from gray moss and despair. It wore a crown of twisted willow. It was the Luna of the blight. Why do you come, little mirror? It spoke, its voice the sound of the dead forest. You have won your battles, you have your connections. Leave this forgotten place to its peace. There is no peace here, I said, my voice small but clear in the awful silence. There is only hunger. You are not a ruler, you are a wound. The figure tilted its head. I am what happens when memory dies, when a place is left alone too long, when the stories stop. The first packs, they fought a great evil here. They won, and then they left. They forgot the cost, forgot the blood that watered this soil, forgot the spirits that fell. I am that forgotten pain. I am the loneliness of a story untold. Understanding, profound and heartbreaking, washed over me. The shadow wasn't an invading enemy, it was a symptom. It was the psychic scar of an ancient trauma that had never been acknowledged, never been healed. The land itself had festered. We are not here to fight you, I said, stepping forward. Kaelin moved with me, our shoulders touching. We are here to remember. I turned to our group. Sing, speak, remember this place. The spirit singer began the oldest song of her people, a song of creation, of the land's first awakening. The truth speaker began to speak the names of ancient heroes from legend, honoring sacrifice. Lyra spoke of the strength it takes to guard. Ronan spoke of loyalty that endures. Finn spoke of the courage to return from the dark. Kaelin spoke of duty not as a burden but as a love for what you protect. And I reached into the Luna bond. I didn't pull strength, I pushed memory. I pushed the memory of green leaves and rushing water. I pushed the memory of pack fires and shared meals. I pushed the memory of Jax's laugh, of Marlene's hands, of Fellan's recovery. I pushed the living, breathing, messy, glorious story of Nightfall and our allies into the heart of the forgotten wound. The gray figure of the Blight Luna watched, and as we remembered, it began to change. Its form softened, the harsh lines of despair smoothed. It didn't look like me anymore. It looked like a sad, ancient she-wolf, a guardian who had been standing vigil alone for millennia. Tears of black water streamed down its face. You remember, we remember, I said, tears on my own cheeks. The fight was not forgotten. The sacrifice was not in vain. We are here because of it. We are the story that continued. I walked to the edge of the black pool. I took off my own willow crown. It was woven from the living grove, from the heart of a healthy pack. I held it out. You are not alone anymore. The Blight Luna reached a trembling, mossy hand. As her fingers touched the living willow, a shockwave of pure green energy erupted from the crown. It shot through her form, down into the black pool, and out through the roots of the dead oak. The gray moss began to flake away, turning to rich, dark soil. The twisted trees groaned and their branches straightened, tiny buds of emerald green pushing through the ash-colored bark. The black pool cleared, becoming a spring of clean, sparkling water. Light, real golden sunlight broke through the perpetual gloom overhead. The blight Luna faded, but as she did, she smiled, a real, peaceful smile. The story goes on "thank you," and she dissolved into a shower of light that sprinkled onto the newborn grass. The heart of the blight was healed. Not by violence, but by an act of profound, collective remembrance. Epilogue: the new grove a year later, the forest where the blight had festered was the most vibrant part of our territory. The great oak stood in the center of a sun-drenched clearing, now covered in lush green leaves, its base circled by the clear, singing spring. We called it the Grove of Remembering. The alliance between Nightfall, Sun Haven, and the Western clans was no longer just a pact of defense. It was a thriving exchange of stories, songs, and healers. The Silent Ones had not awoken, but their bodies were at peace, and we felt their spirits as a gentle, watchful presence in the bond, finally at rest. Kaelin and I stood under the great oak, watching the pack, our pack, in all its beautiful, expanded sense, gather for the spring festival. Lyra was demonstrating a new defensive form to a group of Sun Haven warriors. Marlene and the Western clan weavers were creating a magnificent tapestry depicting the mending. Finn was laughing with Fellan, both of them whole and strong. The mate bond was still gone, a phantom limb. But what Kaelin and I had built in its place was a fortress of shared purpose, deep respect, and a love that was different, not a burning fuse but the steady, enduring warmth of hearthlight. It was stronger. He took my hand, his calloused fingers lacing through mine. No words were needed. The bond between us was the quiet hum of the territory itself, healthy and whole. I was Alara, the rejected Omega, the Luna who passed the trial, the weaver who mended a broken pack and helped heal a wounded land. My story was no longer about what was taken from me. It was about what I chose to build with the pieces. And as the first stars winked into the violet sky and the pack's joined voices rose in a song of renewal, I knew this was only the beginning of our story. A story we would remember together. The journey of Alara and the Nightfall pack is complete. From rejection to redemption, from despair to unity, they proved that true strength lies in the heart, not just the claw. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that broken things can be made whole, please let us know with a huge like. Your support means everything. Share this story with someone who needs a tale of hope. Subscribe for more epic journeys and hit that bell so you never miss a new adventure. Want to see what happens next in this rebuilt world? Should we explore new challenges for Alara and Kaelin? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback could shape the next saga. Thank you for reading. Remember, you are part of a pack too. Never underestimate the power of your story. And if you'd like to give an extra boost of support to our creative team, you can also send a super thanks. It helps us continue bringing you stories like this.